evening and welcome to City of Pasco Council meeting. The council thanks you for being part of the city government. At meetings, the city council takes formal action on items, holds public hearings, and conducts other business of the city. Agenda packets are available on the City of Pasco's website at www.pasco-wa.gov/agenda, or they can be found at the table in the back. This meeting is being televised live on PSC-TV channel 191 on Spectrum Cable in Pasco and Richland, and is streamed on the city's Facebook page, website, YouTube channel, and GoToWebinar. This and previous council meeting video is available on the city's website. Lastly, the public may submit their comments and or questions by contacting the city manager, city clerk, or by using the Ask Pasco app. And with that, can I get roll call, please?
Councilmember Serrano.
Here.
Campos.
Here.
Brown.
Present.
Milne.
Present.
Roach. Councilmember Roach.
She may be joining later.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney
Present.
and Mayor Barajas.
Present. And with that, would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're moving on with our agenda. Item 4 on the Councilwoman
Did you
Roach,
already take it? Yes, I'm here. Did you take attendance already?
and we did, but we've got you checked off now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Item 4 on the agenda, consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by roll call vote as one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If further discussion is desired by council members, the item may be removed from the consent agenda to the regular agenda and considered separately. Item A, approval of meeting minutes for May 15th. Item B, bills and communications, approving claims in the total amount of $6,560,632,000. And just a second, let me backtrack that. $6,650,632,888, and bad debt write-off totaling $23,152.48. Item C, resolution number 4336, bid award Argent Road widening phase 3. Item D, resolution number 4349, authorizing for application to Public Works Board for pre-construction and construction funding for Butterfield WTP improvements. Item E, resolution number 4350, Community Economic Revitalization Board loan agreement acceptance for the processed water reuse facility pre-treatment improvements. And with that, can I get a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
There's a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilman Milne. And can I get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Serrano.
Yes.
Campos.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Milne.
Yes.
Roach.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney
Yes.
and Mayor Barajas.
Yes. And that passes unanimously. Thank you for that. With that, we move on to item number 5, proclamations and acknowledgements, none listed. Moving on to our next item, public comment. The public may address council on any items unless it relates to a scheduled public hearing. This item is provided to allow the opportunity to bring items to the attention of the city council or to express an opinion on an issue. Its purpose is not to provide a venue for debate or for the posing of questions with the expectation of an immediate response. Some questions require consideration by council over time and after a deliberative process with input from a number of different sources. Some questions are best directed to staff members who have access to specific information. Citizen comments will normally be limited to 3 minutes each by the mayor. Those with lengthy messages are invited to summarize their comments and or submit Written information for consideration by the council outside of formal meetings. Let me step back a little bit. We will limit that to 2 minutes, and Ms. Debbie will be controlling the 2-minute mark. You will be getting a notice when you're at 1:45. At 1:45, 1 minute and 45 seconds. And then she'll let you know that your time is almost up. So we advise that you wrap up your comments before your 2-minute mark. And with that, I'd like to invite anyone in the chambers to step up, state your name and address, and make your comment.
Good evening, Council. Button. Good evening, Council. Thanks for your service. I know it's always a sacrifice to be here on a Monday evening, week after week, so thank you for that. Andrew Libbert, live at 10412 Oak Court, Pasco. My wife and I own 3 businesses here in the city of Pasco. And I'm sure you heard or read the news article in Tri-City Herald about Costco doing some feasibility studies on a land lease from the DNR in Richland. You, probably like me, are pretty devastated by that. And I would like to see some decisive action by the City Council to explore immediate action of what can take place to bring Costco to Pasco. I think if we lost that opportunity, that would be a huge, devastating blow to Pasco. I think it's helping us to reach our true potential. We desperately need a larger tax base from commercial retail activity in Pasco, and that is something that will, in my opinion, is a kingpin and will help us to get the growth that we need. And so I would say do whatever you can. If you need to hold a meeting with staff tomorrow and say, what do we need to do? Get Costco on the line, talk to Dale Adams, talk to Tim Ufkis, and make something happen. I know you've passed a TIF, and I have seen the initial grading done. I would love to have an Operation Warp Speed like we did with the public-private partnership in the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's partner with people and let's get things done quickly so we can have a positive impact that, in my opinion, we desperately
15
need.
seconds left.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments?
Good evening, Council. Stephen Bauman. I also reside here in Pasco, and I want to echo what Andrew just said. We need Costco in Pasco. They have announced that they are looking elsewhere, and I think that's really unfortunate. Pasco went to a lot of effort to put together the transportation improvement plan and the tax increment financing area out there. And if the tax increment financing that has been put underway, if the projects don't happen as that they have been planned out there, the taxpayers in Pasco are on the hook for that money, and I think it would be really unfortunate. I think we need to, as quickly as we can, get them under contract and get other projects under contract. As far as I'm aware, there is none of those properties in the heart of that area where the work has been already completed is under contract, and I think that would be unfortunate, and think that it would need to be action on your part that needs to make that happen and direct it to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Second call for comments from anyone in the chambers tonight. Third and final call from any comments from anyone in the chambers tonight. Hearing none, we're going to move forward with our next item on the agenda. Number 7, reports from committees and or officers. Do we have any officers? I know we've had a couple weeks off, 3 weeks off, if I'm not mistaken. So, council members, if you've attended any events, meetings that you'd like to share on. Councilman Campos and then Councilman Serrano.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Barajas. I did attend BFT's quick little powwow to basically set our agenda for this upcoming week. Our board of directors meeting is on this Thursday, and the agenda should be pretty light, but the biggest thing is our operations building is coming along quite well, and we're looking forward to some other developments. Obviously, we're working on development of the area in Broadmoor. We're working on a Queensgate project and our downtown Pasco project. So just looking forward to providing updates probably next meeting on some of the status of those items and figuring out what we're going on. So that's all.
All right, thank you for sharing. Councilman Serrano.
Yeah. First, happy belated 50th birthday to my good friend David. Nice work on surviving a half century. I hope to make it that long.
Excuse me, halfway there.
Yeah.
At least.
But also, last week I had the ability and the privilege to MC the Memorial Day event, and that event just something special. We had World War II veteran, had Vietnam veteran, all part of the ceremony, and then folks that are looking at going into the military, the kids from the Joint Air Guard. I mean, it's just really, it's a generational experience, and we're blessed to have these people who have lived these atrocious experiences here in Tri-Cities to be resources to look at what our current status is and to look towards our future, and hopefully we can learn and benefit from some of what they've survived. And I just thank you to the Parks and Rec staff, Jesse, your team helping out there. Thank you very much. Again, always a class that, I don't like cemeteries, but I like ours. It's really well maintained. I was talking with Dan about what the projections are. How do we build out? What do we have to acquire if we have more people? Looking at the mausoleums, stuff like that. I mean, who thought that much went into planning a cemetery? But it does. And so kudos to that team. I hope they understand how grateful I am to be a part of that, my family too. And it's just awesome to see Pasco come together and celebrate those who gave the ultimate sacrifice.
Thank you for sharing. Mayor Protem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor Barajas. So just a few items I want to talk about. Downtown Pasco, obviously we have done a transition that was publicized about moving from the DPDA being the operating agency over the specialty kitchen and farmers market to now that being the city of Pasco. So lots of good information out there about that, but that has taken place as of, I think, June 1st. I think we officially transitioned over to us. I've been down there for the, I think, every farmers market so far this year, talking to folks and taking an eye on seeing how it's doing. And of course, the transition is being very seamless. Staff is taking a very thoughtful and deliberate approach to making sure that we're doing this in a way that continues to support our business owners, continues to support our downtown. So big kudos to staff for being very thoughtful and intentional about their transition. So bigger changes will be coming. Some things were set in motion by the DPDA before the city of Pasco took over operations, and so I know there'll be some hiccups as we figure out how all those things work and move that along. So anyways, really excited. It was really nice down there the last couple of farmers markets, and if you haven't made it down there, please make the time. It is beautiful down there. It feels really nice. The new pavilions are wonderful for the farmers market, and my wife was very excited that there was a test run for a mushroomery. I forget how the official business name, but selling locally grown mushrooms there at the farmers market. And well, I personally don't enjoy eating fungus. She very much does. So this is their test run. Normally they'd be doing other markets in other cities. They got such a warm welcome and such a pleasant experience that they're at least considering making us part of our permanent stops. So that's the sort of thing that we can bring to Pasco through some of these intentional efforts that we're making to have smooth operations, consistent approaches, and a model that really supports businesses and our downtown. On the same DPDA vein or downtown vein, I was invited to a meeting to discuss the public art aspect of our downtown master plan on Friday. I was joined by a number of staff members, including Mr. Jacob Gonzalez and a number of his staff and other city staff. We talked a lot about murals. We talked about how do we get them funded. We talked about the excitement that comes about from public art. And the meeting was held at the new Cafe Con Arte building right across from the farmers market. So beautiful spot. They're really making it nice. And so it was great to talk about in an art gallery that's going in downtown Pasco, to talk about public art that's going to go in downtown Pasco. It was great synergy, great energy in the room. It was facilitated by our consultants that did the master planning effort. And they walked away giving assignments to private citizens as well as themselves, and city staff volunteering for assignments as well. So there was people taking actions, and it sounds like in the very near future we will see much more strides towards beautifying downtown. Last thing I want to talk about with the, as I've complained about many times, I serve on the Association of Washington City's Legislative Priorities Committee, which I enjoy the people, I enjoy the work. I hate the reason why I felt like I needed to get involved in that and represent Pasco so we can have our voice heard over in Olympia. But nonetheless, we're just getting started on our priorities. Not a lot of surprises. Most of them seem to be very consistent with what you'd expect. So continued fixes to the Blake decision. They knew that it seems like everyone knows that it was already broken coming out of the gate. So I think there'll be some opportunities to have more conversation about this the next year. A lot of more concerns about housing, labor market, not just police officers, but also mental health services and other things like that. So some of our core mission that we've talked about will continue to be big priorities across the entire state. So I hope we can settle around our legislative agenda so I can help make sure that it's part of the state's legislative agenda. So any input anyone would like to give to me, please feel free to. I'm going to ask you to talk to staff about that, and maybe Mr. Lincoln can funnel it towards me so we don't create an accidental quorum or public meeting. Okay, those are the three things I got. So thank you. Exciting stuff in downtown. Pay attention. We're coming out. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Councilman Milne.
Thank you, Mayor. I also wanted to just tag on with Councilman Serrano was talking about on Memorial Day. I was there as well, and I just really wanted to emphasize how well it was put together. It was very timely. Of course, Serrano's speeches was very good. It was just really well done. I liked the flags, and I loved how the staff was there handing out water and doing everything they could to make it just a very memorable event. I'd actually say it was very moving. I was actually surprised how the emotions here in a World War II vet, talk about things and just the music and everything. So I would recommend next year, if you guys have a Monday, just to go down there and just spend an hour with the people that have served our nation so heroically. And again, it's well worth your time. So thank you. Thanks staff, and thanks for the people of the community that were there.
Thank you for sharing. Do you want to second that or third? What everyone is saying. I actually did have that on my notes. I was not able to make memorial festivities at the cemetery. I know I've attended it other times, but sometimes our schedules don't work out. We are a little too busy. But thankfully there's staff and there's other council members that are able to attend and represent the council as a whole. I just did want to say thank you for taking the lead on the Memorial Day festivities year after year, and they keep growing and they keep getting better. Again, this is just to share memory of those individuals that, like you said, gave the ultimate sacrifice for this nation. And having a son who's currently in the military, I would not like to think that he would be part of that celebration someday. So anyways, thank you to all the families that share in our part of the Memorial Day celebrations for that reason. But talking back about Pasco and sharing what Pasco's doing, Pasco's innovative ways and our economic development, and sharing what Pasco's perspective and views, right? I was invited a couple weeks now to be part of, to give input to Senator Cantwell, who was in Seattle, to talk about railway safety. I was there representing our city, of course, and not only that, but the Tri-County, so Benton, Franklin, and Walla Walla counties, to share about railway safety. Again, we have a long stretch of railway, and there's been many accidents, and even more accidents happening in the last 10 years. We're expected to have more railway transit coming through. And obviously, one of the things that Senator Cantwell is looking into making it safer and to not impact our, ecology and our regions, our area. And so was able to be up there and share some talking points again, something for her to take back and consider for our specific region. So that was a great opportunity. And I shared with Adam some context that I made out there. Chief Gear's not here, but Andrew Collins, battalion chief from the Seattle Fire Department, shared his contact information that I then passed on to Adam, so he'll share that with you, Chief Dunbar. Let me see what else. The other thing that I was participant in is the Ellen Ochoa Middle School, named after astronaut Ellen Ochoa. She actually was in town. She had not been in town in about 8 years, and so I was invited by the school district to go and meet with her, share space with her, and hear her unique story. Where she comes from, how she got to be an astronaut, being the first female astronaut, played the flute, first astronaut to play the flute in outer space. So she went around to all the school, met with children, but that was a unique opportunity. So there's pictures on Facebook that the school district shared. And again, representing the city of Pasco. I did have another, over this weekend, just most recently, gosh, it's been busy few weeks. I met head coach Todd Staffik. He is the Tri-City Channel Cats head coach. So we had, if you didn't already know, we had 883 kids competing in our memorial pool. Thank you, Jesse and staff in Parks and Rec for accommodating the group. They had nothing but good feedback. And actually, one thing that I will say that he says, thanks for providing a facility not only for our local team, but also a competitive venue for many competitive swimmers in the Northwest. So that's a message from Mr. Todd. Wanted to share that. It's been busy again. So if you have an event and I don't go, or Mayor Pro Tem doesn't go, but you see other council members out there, we're trying to represent the city council as a whole. We do have very busy schedules, but we do try to be out in the community and be with you. So with that, one other comment, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you, Mayor. My apologies. It has been a little while since we last gave updates. I did want to just mention one more event that you and I were able to attend for the processed water reuse facilities. And we had the governor out here for the second time, and I think within 3 weeks, which is very unusual for anyone on that side of the state to think that we're important enough to show up multiple times. But we were talking about the processed water reuse facility and the agreement that we're moving into for the expansion and upgrade of that facility. And he spoke very highly of it. We had most of our local legislators there. They, of course, are speaking very highly of it. This is one of those areas where it really does have a lot of attention as being something that's very positive in an environmental perspective. But even more importantly, it's a really big positive for the businesses and the agricultural processors that we have in our area. So Mr. Worley did a fantastic job of speaking to the benefits of this program. I don't think we have enough time during any one of those speeches to actually list all the positives and all the different groups and organizations that it positively impacts. I really don't care what your perspective is on a variety of issues. You find something to love about this facility. So, and kudos to staff for all their hard work in putting that together. And that was a great event. And Mayor, you did a great job for representing us on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Campos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to talk about the rail safety for just a split second. As a former BNSF freight conductor, we recently had a 19-year-old that was struck and killed out in Badger Canyon, and they think that she was walking with her headphones in, most likely. And I just want to share with people, when you work around these locomotives and you work around these freight cars, you absolutely do not feel them. The way the rail system is designed, it's to take vibrations out. You don't feel them coming. You don't hear them coming. If you can't see them, you're not going to do the other two. So please encourage your friends and family. If you're going to cross the tracks, cross them immediately and then stay off them. It is not something you want to think about on losing a family member like that. But then, as a rail crew, you know, you have to live with that the rest of your life too, that you've impacted a family. There's no way you can stop. And it's not just the locomotives, it's the cars too. So if you come across an empty track with some cars in it and you're out near it, you go between those cars, you know, it doesn't take very much to all of a sudden have that thing pick up speed and you're no longer with us. So very important to share that message. I think it's not just environmental impacts. There's some big personal safety things that I think as a community we see. I don't want to say once a year, but every couple of years. I know in Findlay we've had strikes. Just stay off the tracks, please.
Thank you for sharing that precaution. Good information to share. With that, seeing no other comments from council members, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item number B, 7B, our general fund monthly report from Director Buckley.
Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council members. It's good to speak to you again. Tonight I'm going to talk about the end of April general fund report. Next slide, please. Of course, we start as typical with the building permit activity, and one of the reasons that we always focus on that is because it does have a lasting impact both in the permit fees that are collected, but also sales tax for construction. It adds to our utility customer base and property tax base as well. So we always look at this, and you can see that while the count between the two April year-end numbers is slightly lower, the dollar value of the permits is quite a bit higher, namely because of commercial and industrial permit types. The only place that there's a reduction is in the residential permit types. So we'll continue just to report this and let you know how that is going and what the impact might be down the road. Next slide, please. And then that moves us right to sales tax. Through the end of April, our sales tax is lower than it was at the end of April 2022. That is the trend that we've seen so far in 2023. It is primarily tied to construction sales tax, it represents 28% of the 2023 budget, and if it was the one, I guess I'm getting off track. It is the one thing I can add that you can't see on the slide is I did check May sales tax because we just had the receipts returned, and in that we actually have an increase, so it's higher. We had $1.826 million in sales tax for the month of May, so we'll watch that trend and see if it continues. It is partially tied to construction sales tax in May, and then the highest rate, and I know in your packet there's more detail than is here, but the highest category of sales tax that we receive is in motor vehicle and parts dealers category, and then the next is the construction of building sales tax. So we'll continue to report as we move through the year. Next slide, please. This is the revenue budget comparison. And we're just looking at the biennial budget and then year-to-date through April 2023. Some categories are below where we think we would be. Well, really it's below what the linear even collection would be. It's not necessarily in actual activity that way any year, but as talked about just momentarily, the sales tax, retail sales tax is slightly lower. Utility tax and general property tax are not, there may be different by, if you divide 4 divided by 12 as April would be 16%, but they're not lower as far as comparison for previous year, nor lower. They're naturally a little lower because they're always in arrears as the collection is a month behind. Our other sales tax, or other tax, is higher than it was last year. I think last year was $42,000, and now we're at 258, which is a reflection of an increase in collection and gambling tax. And then everything else is pretty much online with where we would expect it to be at this time in the year. Next slide, please. Expenses year to date are also lower than the budget, which is good since our revenues are a little behind what the linear expectation would be or calculation would be. And you can see there in the very far right-hand column, I put operational spending, and I purposely ignored the transfers and subsidies and capital outlays and the debt payments because those things are knowns. They just happen at different times in the year, and I thought the parts that were most interesting and were the operational items like labor costs and supplies and services. And you can see that our labor costs are behind what the budget would be if it was even, and meaning spending less, the expenses are lower, and our supplies and services are somewhat higher, but they net to be lower in spending. We're spending less than if it was 4/12 of a year. And so we're higher salaries and our labor costs were somewhat we're budgeted, but based on how we can hire people, when we can hire people, that is saving us some money. We have some savings as the year has gone by, just because we're understaffed in some areas as compared to budget. And then supplies and services are higher, but partially that is just one time or infrequent purchases. We are looking at the things that are 20% or higher and asking for, kind of comparing each month. We meet with departments and look at their actual to budget comparison and look for things and trends or items that we want to pay attention to and mitigate any long-term overruns. So that's something we'll continue to monitor with the help of the departments as we go through the year. Next slide, please. And then this is just looking year to date to compare actuals. It's not like, as I just mentioned, we've budgeted for higher expenses, so our budget wise we are behind, but just as a way to see a trend of expenses as we move through years, the labor costs are higher as compared to last year, but that was planned. Supplies has increased a lot, and some of that is timing, but also some of that is inflationary pressure, so that's something we're monitoring. And then capital outlays, while it looks like a huge change, it's just those are planned capital spending items, and so not over what we expect it to be. But I wanted to share that just so as we move to mid-biennium budget review, and in next year we'll start planning again. It's good to, I think, keep those in mind as we're thinking of what's coming and how we plan and work together. And then finally, a couple of items along that vein that we know will make a difference in the future are, and they're not necessarily occurring right away, but there are things to think about, are the end of the SAFER grant. I know you all know we got the SAFER grant last year and started hiring firefighters to man Fire Station 80, or be prepared to man Fire Station 85 when it's built. And so when that ends, the general fund will need to pick up that cost. And so that's on this table. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you move it to the next slide? Thank you. I'm looking at my computer and not the screen everyone else sees. Thank you. So when the SAFER grant ends, we'll want to be prepared to build that into the general fund budget. And then also we are in the midst of issuing bond debt to fund the construction cost of Fire Station 85. The actual work is already progressing, as is the issuance of debt. It just takes a good amount of time, so we're doing that. And we haven't decided and don't know exactly how those costs will be funded, but as a comparison, we added here the percentage of the 2023 budgeted property tax that dollar value equates to, and then what that cost would calculate as part of a levy rate, just using the rate that we currently have and those additional costs. For a house valued at $400,000, it would make the rate increase by $66 a year should those be built into property tax. That's not necessarily what will happen, but that's a good, we thought that was a way to share it and measure it and get that in everyone's minds as something that we'll be dealing with as we move into the next budget season. Next slide, please. So to finish this up, this is only through the end of April. There are some things I think that will make a difference as we move into the summer's months. Construction will, I think, pick up. I can't guarantee it, but we know that the permit values have increased a lot as compared to last year. So as spending occurs to get that work done, we should see the sales tax follow. And then expense activity, while revenues are a little lagging, the expense activity also is lower than the budgeted, so that is a good correlation there, and or at least they benefit each other. And we'll continue to monitor the activity, especially in the services and supplies, to make sure that there aren't areas that we can deal with sooner, and look for options to have some savings and mitigate cost. And then finally, we are working on the debt issuance and for the Fire Station 85, as well as construction work out in the for the utilities. So part of which is in the Broadmoor area. So that work is underway, and as we go forward, we'll go to the mid-biennium review. We'll talk more about all those items. So. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And if you move to the next slide, you can see a nice picture, a couple nice pictures from the police station groundbreaking for the regional academy. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you for your report, Director Buckley. Do we have any questions, comments from council members? It seems that we don't. Thank you so much. So with that, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item number 8, hearings and council action on ordinances and resolutions relating thereto. Item A, public hearing, right-of-way vacation for Snake River Agriculture, and Jacob.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is an agenda item in reference to a request by Snake River Agricultural LLC, who has submitted a request to vacate a portion of South Oregon Avenue located at the intersection of East 8th Street and South Oregon Avenue. The requested vacation encompasses approximately 1/4 of an acre. The Pasco Municipal Code is fairly clear about the criteria associated with vacation requests as outlined in PMC 12-40070. These criteria essentially summarized are that the vacation shall not adversely impact accessibility and circulation within the immediate area or within the city as a whole, that the right-of-way is not contemplated or needed for future use, that no abutting property will become landlocked or its access substantially impaired, or that the public's needs shall not be adversely impacted. Staff's primary concern at this stage involves the uncertainty surrounding the potential effects of increased traffic, particularly freight, resulting from industrial and other developments in the immediate vicinity. The impact of this increased traffic, particularly from trucks, remains unclear and may pose significant considerations for the viability and safety of the proposed vacation. I do want to point out that pending traffic impact analysis from the surrounding industrial developments, just the industrial developments to the east of the site, indicate that there will be upwards of 10,200 trips within the immediate area of the Heritage Industrial Site. Given the above mentioned factors and the lack of concurrence with the criteria of PMC 12-40070, that's the vacation request criteria, staff is unable to support the application for a vacation. Additionally, staff would like to highlight that within, not visible on this aerial, but to the immediate south, we do have an active rail line, and Oregon Avenue, the main north-south thoroughfare here, is identified by the Washington State Department of Transportation as a Tier 2 arterial for freights and good transportation system, and that 8th Street is identified as a Tier 3 arterial for the freights and good transportation system. And obviously the preservation of our freight access points is a goal of the Pasco Comprehensive Plan and various other economic development strategies. With that, I'd also like to pass this on for input from Public Works Director Steve Worley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I just wanted to add a little bit to it in terms of transportation from a public works perspective. There's been times in my experiences where we have jumped a little too early on the vacation of right-of-way, thinking that we don't need that right-of-way anymore, just to find out later that after more information becomes available, more development occurs, all of a sudden we find that we do need to acquire that right-of-way back again. And so I have been reluctant to support this because I don't want to put the city in a position where until we know for sure what kind of potential intersection improvements might be needed here related to the proposed developments along A Street, I would be very reluctant to support a vacation until we knew for sure that we didn't need the right-of-way. I don't know if Oregon Avenue at this point is ever going to need another lane for a right turn at that location. I don't know if the intersection is going to expand. There's been options discussed about possibly doing license agreements, but when you add improvements, physical hard improvements inside the right-of-way under a license agreement, if you ever have to go back and do an intersection improvement, well, then you're fighting to get those hard improvements removed, which sometimes can be difficult. And I have had to pay quite a bit for a couple of parking spaces in my past. So I'm trying to keep Pasco from getting itself in that position. I think there are ways that we can certainly work on getting access to Oregon if that's necessary, but I wouldn't recommend that we vacate any right-of-way as of yet. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jacob.
Yeah, staff would just note that we've got several preliminary pending projects outside of the industrial development within the immediate area to the south. There's a fairly significant mixed-use project occurring with the Port of Pasco, and the evaluation of this entire area will be required. So we do not yet know the traffic implications of that project. We've also got a pending land use amendment a little bit to the east of this site that still has to be resolved. So those two pending projects on top of the industrial development that we've reviewed already, I think, again, what emphasized Director Worley's point about a potential premature decision on the vacation of potentially needed right-of-way in the future.
Thank you for that. Now, this is a public hearing. Do we have any questions or comments from council, of staff, before I open this public hearing? Councilman Serrano?
Thank you. When did this first come before us? I want to say it's been a couple of years, right?
I don't believe the vacation request has been in front of us for a couple of years. I know that I think the first public hearing in front of council was in December of 2022.
Okay. For some reason, it just seems like it's been a while because anyway, I think that was my primary concern. Was it seemed like it had been quite some time that this had been before us and preceded or predated some of these other improvements we're discussing. I guess fundamentally my question here is, assuming my timing's incorrect, are we treating all applicants the same by taking these global perspectives, these regional perspectives, in whether or not to grant an easement right away or vacate rights away? I want to make sure we're doing that. Again, I recall the hearing, and I thought I recalled it was before that, but I do see your dates here. So I just want to make sure we're being fair across the board and we're doing the right thing. Treating everyone the same.
Mr. Strong, I can speak to a little bit of that. So essentially this this process started, and as alluded to previously, this is outlined in our code, and our code is obviously based on the state law. So essentially, and it is kind of a confusing situation because while it looks like your typical land use applicant type situation, it is much different in the sense that these are public rights of way. Local governments retain the ability to control those. They're hard to come by, obviously, because they're property rights that are dedicated to the city through projects and whatnot. So what is interesting, though, is that while the term applicant is used in this context, it's not your standard applicant situation where they have a particular land use rights that would be at stake. So it is a legislative act of the city to grant this. That's why the standards, the criteria in our code and in the state law are so specific that we have to meet all of those before we can relinquish these rights because they are the city's. And that's why our code also outlines ways in which folks can petition, essentially, the city to try to get these rights vacated. So it's more of a petitioner situation. It is an application that you have to fill out, so it uses that term, but it doesn't use that term very legally correctly in terms of there's no specific land use rights that the applicant has. It's really just petitioning the local government agency to determine whether it fits their criteria and it's right of way that is not anticipated to be used in the future. So that's while there's obviously a customer service aspect to that in terms of treatment and fairness or whatever, there's not a legal requirement that we need to be focusing on there.
Okay, I greatly appreciate that. And I guess my 2 cents kind of preempting this, where this may go is if this is denied, I think there's value in continuing these license questions and this conversation with the applicant. I understand Mr. Worley's hesitation that, depending on what the use is, and I'm not quite clear on that, quite frankly, of what the applicant or whatever we want to call the individual in this case, what exactly that use is. I think just, to the extent that there may be a beneficial use, but, we may have a greater use that's forthcoming. I realize that those two may be at odds. So I guess just wherever we go, it's kind of, if we can keep the door open if possible, great. If not, then so be it.
Any other comments from council? Hearing none. Now that I open this over to public, if anyone in the public has any comments regarding this particular subject, please step forward, state your name for the record.
Good evening, council. My name is Stephen Bauman. I'm the owner of B4 Development and Consulting, and I'm here on behalf of the owner, Steve West and Snake River Ag. He sent his regrets. He was not able to be here. He wasn't feeling well this afternoon. Thank you for having this opportunity here tonight. I'd like to share with you a number of things. I want to say thank you to Mr. Worley for always being willing to discuss and how we do have a difference in our understanding of this. I do appreciate his willingness to always have a conversation. Several things I'd like to share with you. If you go to page 49 of your agenda packet tonight, under section V, or I believe 5, I'm going to quote, it says, in an effort to gather more information, the applicant's representative has been requested to provide any relevant documentation and or details, but thus far no response or information has been received. And I would like it to be set into the record that is inaccurate information, and I would be happy to provide a very extensive list of the communications and the maps that have been provided. Can I provide this to you or to the clerk?
Miss Debbie. Thank you.
Those lines in this agenda packet are unfortunate. Also, as was quoted earlier by the interim Economic Development Director, Pasco Municipal Code 12.40.070 are not relevant in this. I would like to point out how they are irrelevant. Also in your agenda packet on page 55, I'm going to read from an email that was written by the regional planning engineer for the Washington State Department of Transportation. So I won't belabor you. Unless you would like it, I would be happy to revisit how we got to this point and please feel free to stop me and I would be happy to recount how we've gotten to this point. But on page 55 of your agenda packet, I quote, "We have reviewed the vacation request and find this property is not needed for the current or future operation of the city street SR 397. Therefore, the Washington State Department of Transportation approves this vacation request. WashDOT has also reviewed our records and find that the state did not contribute any funds in acquiring this property, so all revenue derived from the vacation of such rights-of-way shall be the city's." The reason I wanted to point that out to you is while this is a city street, it is also a state route, which is under the jurisdiction of the State Department of Transportation. And they found that this was unnecessary for current or future use. If you look at the bottom of that, page 55, it's response from the City of Pasco staff and them not having interest in that right-of-way and saying it was not theirs anyway. I think it would, I believe that it serves all parties well to vacate this as requested. The ultimate goal that my client would like to have is access at the lower end of the picture at the narrowest point of that site. My client would like access from his property into the SR 397 or Oregon Avenue as we know it. The reason we would like the entire thing vacated is so that it doesn't become an orphan parcel or a piece of delinquent ground that is not improved. Pasco Municipal Code in their development standards, you are required to improve your property where you front a street. This property in this picture obviously fronts a street. It does not front Oregon Avenue. There's been discussion of staff that has not been completed of where Pasco Municipal Code would require my client to improve everything on that site absent this right-of-way vacation. Would love to answer any questions that you have. A lot of information in that packet. Emails that have gone back and forth. There is questions in there that have not been answered. And with this email dated of September last year from the Washington State Department of Transportation, I believe that email very clearly points out that RCW that was pointed out earlier is none of those criteria are found. There's 4 criteria, and I believe none of them are excuse me, filled in this. None of them are violated in this request to vacate this right of way. Any questions for me?
No questions. Thank you. I guess this is information that we'll have to review and if there are any questions, we'll bring it up to staff, I guess.
One thing else I would like to point out in page 58 of your agenda packet, very unfortunate in there, it's in the second paragraph from the top of that page. It says they are hoping to get something for nothing. As far as I'm aware, we have never asked that this be given for free. That is the standard process that when a parcel is adjacent to, it is given back unless there's extenuating circumstances or if there is a, it's of great value or that it could be sold to somebody else. And we have never been asking for something for free. The way we see it, it brings it into the tax-paying area for the city of Pasco, and it makes the property itself better because the entire area is improved.
Yeah, question. We do have a question from Councilman Serrano.
So to clarify, what you're fundamentally needing this for is, you said you just need access to 395 on the southern piece?
Yes, if you'll look in there, there's a map in that packet that shows approximately what the intention is.
Page 10.
Yeah, I believe there's only one
Yeah.
it's that map there. I ran out of white paper, so I've
No,
got
it's
yellow.
fine.
Approximately at this location.
Okay, no, I can see it from the picture. That's helpful, thank you.
If the vacation of this right-of-way were to be granted, it would be potential to adjust that alignment and put some potential parking stalls in there. It could not be anything beyond that. It cannot be a building or anything of the sort because of an underlying sewer easement that runs through there. Approximately alignment where the point of where it says site, at the point there, running vertical on that screen up into Weehee Avenue, on that alignment, there's a sewer easement. And so it couldn't be anything except for landscaping or potentially parking. It wouldn't be any building. There would be no encroachment of any kind there. There's sewer there. I believe there's also power lines. And so by improving this, it would certainly improve the intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from council members? Thank you for the,
Madam Mayor, I have
Councilman Campos.
a question for staff. Mr. Gonzalez, so I want to make sure I understand this right. You're telling me that all 4 criteria under PMC 12.40.07 have to be met in order for us to make a determination on this vacation?
The way the criteria of the municipal code reads is that those criteria are necessary to meet in order for the vacation request to be granted.
Okay. One last time, make sure, again, it's been a long day for me. So in order for us to make a determination, all 4 of those have to be considered in order for us to make a determination.
That is how I would interpret the municipal code.
Okay.
That's correct, and that's based on the state law.
So it's based on state law and all 4 must be met. Any further questions from council?
Mayor, just clarification, I know we have a motion, whether it's, are we gonna like,
This
push
is,
this off so
this
we
is-
can read this, or?
so we're still at the public hearing and still taking comment from public before we go into a motion. And then at that point, we'll figure out if we approve or deny. Thank you, Mr. Brownman. Any other individual would like to make a comment on this hearing? Second call from chambers for comment.
I would just ask that you look at that letter from the Washington State Department of Transportation. I believe that letter very clearly shows that none of those criteria in Pasco Municipal Code 12.40.070, none of those are not met. And I think that that's shown in the Washington State Department of Transportation's email dated September the 16th. Thank you.
Thank you. Third and final call from anyone in chambers to make comment on this hearing. Seeing none, I'm going to close this public hearing and does council wish to discuss before we go into a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to discuss.
Councilman Campos and then Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to be clear in this letter that we've got from WADOT lists an RCW, which talks about other rights of way, but going back to the PMC again, we're being instructed that the PMC is clear. I do have concern because I feel like at least 3 of these criteria in the PMC are met, and the only thing that we're hung up on is we don't know for sure if there is an adverse effect on the traffic accessibility. And if we had that answer, that this right of way would be vacated, I think that it would probably be pretty simple to say because of the case. And number 2, for the PMC 12.40.070, the right of way is not contemplated or needed for future public use. WADOT basically said that they don't think so. So I guess I could say that that's probably it. But no abutting property, my biggest one is no abutting property will become landlocked or its accessibility substantially impaired. Who's determining substantiability? The landowner could say that they're substantially impaired by only having minimum egress access to their site. And based on their proposed plat, which I'm not considering legally binding, I would say that that's a fair criteria. And then 4, the public need shall not be adversely affected, and the vacation will not provide a public benefit or serve a public purpose. I think that meets that criteria. So I'm kind of the mind that maybe a little more deliberation and giving staff some time to provide an answer to some of the other things that have been provided to us tonight, I think would be beneficial. That's my stance.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I clarify a couple of points that?
Absolutely.
So essentially, what the difference between what you're reading with WashDOT and the RCW requirements, that's what they need to be able to do to be able to dedicate this to the city or to be able to vacate this to the city. That's what's taking place, and that's why they're referring to City Street parentheses State Route 397. That's what the criteria they have to meet. Now the ball's in your court. It's your right of way. So now you have to meet these criteria separate and apart from that. So number 2, just specifically to talk about number 2, the key word there is contemplated. At this point, I think that's what staff is trying to communicate is at this point we can't say that it's not contemplated. So that's the staff recommendation. At the end of the day, that's a council decision. This is a legislative act. So that would be something that the council would have to determine. And to the second point, Councilmember Campos, on number 3, substantially impaired, that is a judgment made by council. That's who gets to make that decision. So if that's helpful at all.
That is helpful. Thank you for the clarification. Again, I think that it easily meets, for me, my definition on how I look at it, it meets at least 2 of these. But again, if the direction and the law requires us to consider all 4, I think I may need more time to determine and go through some of the information to make sure that it doesn't meet 1 or 2.
Okay. Councilman Brown?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm just gonna echo what Mr. Campos has said, but it's weird. We're at an impasse. Either the criteria is met or it's not met, but then I have a but. Have we just sat down and talked about that with the other side and said, hey, look, this is how we can guide you, or vice versa? So that will require some more talking time. So to make the decision tonight doesn't seem 100% comfortable.
All that your code requires is that you may, I'll read the direct language so that we're all on the same page here, but essentially all the code requires is that following a public hearing thereon, the city council may authorize an ordinance. So you're fortunately not under any kind of time constraint based on the code or anything in state law that I'm aware of. And so there is time if that is what council wishes to do. You don't have to act. We would need to put together an ordinance. Obviously, there's not an ordinance before you to vacate that this evening. So that's something that you would have to direct us to do. But at this point, really, the 2 options this evening are to move to continue or table this matter to an item or to a meeting in the future, or deny.
Any further comment? Councilwoman Roach, are you still with us? Do you have any comment?
I am with you. No, not at this time.
Thank you. Mayor Protem Maloney?
Thank you, Mayor Barajas. Yeah, there's a lot in this packet, and as you know, I do like to make sure I'm well informed, and some of this does seem differently than was included in the packet. Whether it's substantial enough to make a difference here, I'm not sure because we just received it, so I need some time. I will certainly be needing some time to deliberate on this, so I have no intention of supporting a motion to deny tonight. I do have, I think, some of the same questions that Councilmember Campos was bringing up are very much of a concern to me, and I want to understand better how all this fits together. I mean, obviously, from a city planning perspective, the best thing we can have is we have all the land in the city, right? We have full control over everything. Well, that's obviously ridiculous, right? So we want to. So what is our goal as a city in terms of having land? And we want to have just enough to do everything we need, and not a square foot more than what we need is our goal. Now, because the world's uncertain, that's never going to be quite the case, but we can certainly see other areas in the city where we would have really liked to have more right-of-way. Look along Road 68, and you can't tell me that we wouldn't love to have one or two more lanes right along there to be able to help funnel traffic and where we just literally can't. So how does this play out in this particular one? I need to read through this packet a little more, and I need to understand better from staff when we would be expected to know some of these things. I don't want to hold on to land indefinitely for a potential use sometime in the indefinite future. I want to know a much more clear timeline. When would we expect to know whether or not we will need this land for roads? And if the answer is a decade, 2 decades from now, that's probably not very satisfying for me. If it's we're going to know in 6 months, that's a lot better of an answer. But I'll be honest, I'm having trouble visualizing much of a use for this that wouldn't fit more of a partial vacation based on the very quick glimpse of map I looked at here, where there couldn't be some sort of middle ground where we can compromise, where there's a portion of this right of way that is done. And if there's something that we as a city need to be doing better to be good stewards of the land we own, to make sure that it fits well within the community and within property owners, if that's ultimately the direction we want to go, it seems like there's a better spot to be than we are tonight. So I would like to make a motion in a little bit. I'm not ready to make it right now, but I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and continue this I'd like to continue it for 2 weeks to give staff some time to answer some of these questions, and then we'll see if we need to continue from there. I don't want to hold off on the petitioner indefinitely. That's not fair. So I would like to give him an answer certain, but I'm not ready to make that decision yet tonight.
Councilman
you.
Campos? Thank you.
Thank-
Councilman Campos?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I'm trying to draw from my memory banks, I think probably a reason why WADOT gave this up, again, some of the discussions on good roads was that at the time, last fall, early winter, I think the assumption was that this corridor on 397 was actually going to see less impact than a lot of people thought, right? It's a public concern when they hear Amazon and they hear truckloads that they're worried about this particular intersection. And I think that the planning effort and the data that they had available to them is that US 12 is actually going to carry a lot of that. And the way that intersection is built out, it's going to be sufficient for the traffic. But we just know that we didn't get some of our budget for traffic studies on US 12. And so I think, if our burden is to look at what our potential future impact is, I'd like to have some of that information, kind of help me refresh my memory and maybe reach out to some of those powers that be, see what that impact is. Because if we, like you said, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, if it's a quick, easy answer, well, bureaucratically, if it can get in front of us in the next 6 months, not ideal, but it's a lot better than a year. And I'd like to know what that looks like, because again, property rights are important. And I think that if we as a city have no intention of doing anything with that, I would much rather have it built out on our tax base and, collecting some property tax. So, anyways, and thank you, Mr. Bauman, for your patience on this. I know this has been a little bit of a headache for you, but hopefully your faith, and we're trying to work through it. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So since it sounds like my guess is not all of us are ready to move forward. I mean, 2 of us are not ready to move forward. I don't know where I sit as, I think I could make the decision, but fundamentally, if we're coming back presumably in 2 weeks, I think the answers that need to be provided us are, one, how does the new packet align with what's in here in the packet provided to council? And 2, I appreciate Mr. Ferguson's context here. Not contemplated being a legislative, quasi-legislative decision from this body, not from that body. I think we need to really understand, to your point, I don't want to wait 6 months to find out from a traffic study that 72 vehicles instead of several thousand are coming. I think we need to know as best information as the staff has, how many, what does that really look like? What's the predictive context of this? As far as landlocked, I guess I slightly differ from you, and this is where the applicant's drawn what I see as the most minimal impact for ingress and egress. And while it could be contemplated as landlocked for future land use if ever sold, this is per their request. I see it hopefully, and I'm drawing probably context that doesn't exist. It's that an applicant wants to use the site and wants to have minimal impacts and utilize it in a way that allows the city for its future potential. I'm giving it kind of that rose-colored glasses here. But I do think that if that's the intent and that's the use that's projected, then, you want to buy yourself limited access, so be it, as long as you can develop it in the way you need. So I think this kind of goes back to our conversations that we've had historically, which is there's a use, let's grant that use, as opposed to saying let's not grant that use and let the market bear its conditions. I've heard that a lot. So I don't think landlocked, again, my perspective is different. So I think fundamentally we as a body need to decide what not contemplated means based on better information. So hopefully in 2 weeks that's brought to us. If not, I would be remiss if we continue it again.
Any further comments? I just want to add real quick that this is new information, and I would like to be able to have time to look over this new information before we make a final decision. We close the hearing. Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead, Mayor Protem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor Barajas. I move to continue this right-of-way vacation request to the meeting of June 20th, June 19th, remember it being a holiday, June 20th of 2023.
There's a motion. Can I get a second? Seconded by Councilman Milne. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed?
No.
So 6 in favor, 1 opposed. Is that correct?
I just want to make sure we didn't need a roll call.
Do we want to do a roll call vote on this?
I don't want to. I just want to make
Okay.
sure we need to.
So 6 in favor, 1 opposed. Any comments, Mr. Ferguson?
No, I was just gonna say it's up to the chair to decide.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And with that, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item number 9. Ordinances and resolutions not related to hearings. 9A, ordinance number 4670, amending PMC Title 2025 related to retail sales cannabis. And again, interim director, Mr. Gonzalez. I said Jacob earlier. I apologize for that.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This item covers an ordinance amending Pasco Municipal Code related to the sales of cannabis. Following the May 8th workshop, an updated ordinance has been prepared for council discussion and recommendation this evening. Staff recommends that the reduction in buffers allowed for retail facilities pertaining to the downtown area be defined using a fixed boundary, such as a public right-of-way, as opposed to limiting the reduction to a specific zone in the downtown area. The benefit of using a fixed boundary is that it eliminates a conformance issue due to properties zoning themselves into or out of the C2 zoning district. We actually have that coming up into the hearing examiner in the next couple of weeks. And you will see that language called out in the proposed ordinance under PMC 2510-0253. And the delineation of using the streets include those lots, legal conforming lots bound by North 5th Avenue, West Clark Street, North 2nd Avenue, and West Columbia Street. I'd now like to pass this report, this presentation on to City Attorney Eric Ferguson for additional input.
So, not sure how much more there is to say about this topic. We've been here a couple times, so yeah, really happy to answer any questions. The goal was to draft the reduction in buffer. You'll notice the big distinction between this version and the version that we spoke about on, I believe, May 8th is we added, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney requested that we add the language related to the nuisances, both specific and chronic. We needed to do some updates there. Page 70 of your packet shows the changes in language. Go back to page 69 at the bottom, number 17. That was a needed update, as obviously it wasn't even in compliance with current state law. So the other references are changes from marijuana to cannabis. Then on page 73 of your packet is where the specific ordinance that will change the quote ban related to retail sales. So if you look at paren 2 there under conflicting provisions, you'll notice that it states that cannabis related land uses such as cannabis production, processing, and or cooperatives as may otherwise be allowed by state law or expressly prohibited. So that maintains a ban on those activities. So by subtraction, the only thing that is left is retail, and it's no longer prohibited. And then later on in the next section, it talks about how retail facilities as defined later on, and then we still have a limitation of 3 stores, generally 4 if one of those is a quote social equity licensee. The next section 2 really talks about the buffers that are required at a basic level at the state law. Kind of out of the gate are 1,000 foot for these facilities. Then section 3 relates to the reduction in buffers. The way that you specifically do that is call out the amount of space that you're willing to reduce that buffer. And then what we've done is you'll see in the last sentence of paren 3 there on page 74, therefore the city establishes the following buffers for cannabis retailers for legal nonconforming lots bound by North 5th Avenue, West Clark Street, North 2nd Avenue, and West Columbia Street as stated below. And then of course there's those are all been reduced to 100 feet, notwithstanding elementary and secondary schools and playgrounds. We cannot reduce those buffers less than 1,000 feet. Those have to be maintained. Then on the page 75, the ordinance just make sure that it lays out the same requirements that are in the state law and that liquor cannabis uses to do these measuring with these buffers between proposed locations and the prohibited areas. Some definitions towards the bottom of page 75, and then the rest of the ordinance is each section that, because it's alluded to prior in the ordinance, that it's not allowed except as otherwise delineated in this title. And so this is, since it's the zoning code, each of the zones has now, as you go through, you see each of the zones, C1 through 3 and I1 through 3, you'll see an addition of cannabis retail facilities allowed. So essentially, that's what it's come down to, and this ordinance, we believe, would allow up to 3, potentially 4 cannabis retail facilities in those zones, C1, C2, C3, I1, I2, and I3, with a reduction in buffer of the area aforementioned in downtown.
Mayor Protem Maloney, you have some questions. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
I was just going to make a statement. We've hashed this through again and again and again. I don't think I need to state opinions or interpretations of overall reasons why, or I will continue to support this. But I will say that staff, it looks like staff implemented exactly what we asked for. It's not necessarily what I wanted, and it's not, I don't think, what necessarily anybody here wanted. But we are at a conclusion, and I am ready to move forward and make the motion whenever council would like me to. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from council? Councilwoman Roach, do you have any comments?
I do not, and just echo what Mayor Protem said. I'd like to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Serrano.
Yeah, Mr. Ferguson, I just want to make sure there may be some carryover, and it probably is irrelevant, like 25, 100.020, 14. It's 15, but I don't know what the major packet. It's 15 of the ordinance.
Okay.
The contractor's plan of storage yard, is that applicable? Just want to make sure that it's.
So no, those are all the use,
Okay.
all the, in that particular section of C3, general business, those are all the permitted uses.
Okay.
So those are all the items that folks could come in currently, could come in and apply for a permit to be able to have that type of business in that zone. And then if you'll see number 15 on the top of the next page now has been added,
Yeah.
cannabis retail.
Okay. All right. I was just reading through. I want to make sure we didn't, have some carryover that got missed. And then the next subsection of 020 permitted uses. I'm trying to reconcile subsection 12 parking lots within 500 feet of the C2 district boundary, and then we've got the other. Is that going to be the appropriate distance given the other minimized distances in the prior section of that addresses the downtown corridor?
That the reduction or the limitations of distance are only related to that particular use. So that would only apply to parking lots and wouldn't have a distinct. Now, if it was some kind of combination facility, that could get a little interesting. But this looks like it's something that's specifically related to just the parking lot.
I know we've asked you to do the impossible to split it every which way to make everyone equally unhappy. And I just want to make sure that in so doing, you didn't then forget to carve this out because it's then in conflict.
To that point,
You've done
there
your
could be a
best.
need to come back and clean up some stuff, but
That's
it
fine.
certainly wouldn't be anything that would.
No, that's fine. I'm seeing things. I want to call it out. So if we can change it or it needs to be changed, it's done. That's pretty much it. I do find it interesting that we're reducing the buffer zones in the C2 zone, which was one of the areas people expressly did not want it. But it is what it is.
Any other comments? Hearing none, can I get a motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 4670, amending section 9.90.1 or 040 of the Pasco Municipal Code, amending section 9.95.030, and amending section 25.10.020, creating a new section 25.10.025, and amending sections 25.15.050C, 25.85.020, 25.90.020, 25.100.020, 25.115.020, 25.120.020, and 25.125.020 PMC relating to the cannabis retail facilities and further authorize publication by summary only.
There's a motion, can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Campos. All those in favor say aye.
Madam Mayor, can we get a roll call, please?
Absolutely. We'll get a roll call vote on this.
Councilmember Roach,
Yes.
Serrano.
No.
Campos,
Yes.
Brown, Milne,
No.
Maloney,
Yes.
and Barajas.
Yes.
So that's 5-4, 2 against.
Thank you, and it passes. And with that, we go on to our next item on the agenda, item B. Ordinance number 4671 Lewis Street LLC for Jefferson Landing rezone R1A to R4. Interim Director Gonzalez.
Madam Mayor, before we move forward with that, I think Mayor Pro Tem Maloney has a request.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. At the advice of our legal counsel, I'd like to motion to table this item at this time to bring back to a meeting in the future.
Thank you. There's a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Campos. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And it passes unanimously. Thank you. So we move on to our next item on the agenda, item number 10, unfinished business, none listed. Item 11, new business. A, presentation of the proposed 2024-2029 6-year transportation improvement plan, Interim Director Gonzalez.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. The city is required by state law to develop a 6-year transportation improvement program, or TIP. The program acts as a guide for coordinated development of the city's transportation system. There are a variety of projects on this year's proposed TIP, and here tonight is our development services lead in the Department of Community and Economic Development, Jessica Bracken, who will present to council the 2024-2029 Transportation Improvement Program.
Hello, Mayor and council members.
How are you, Ms. Bracken?
Hello, good. How are you guys?
Good.
This will be my second year presenting the Transportation Improvement Plan. It's actually about an hour earlier than we had to present last year, so we're doing pretty good.
We'll finish an hour and a half earlier.
Uh-oh. So the Transportation Improvement Plan is something that is required by the RCWs that has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, include bike and pedestrian facilities, be adopted before July 1st after a public hearing, and be filed with the Secretary of Transportation within 30 days of adoption. So this is something that we update every year. I am presenting this to you today, and then in 2 weeks, we will be back to have the public hearing and a resolution for adoption. And then following that, we can submit it to the state. The Transportation Improvement Plan is a list of projects that are brought about from our comprehensive plan, council goals, and studies, which include the TSMP, the Transportation System Master Plan, our local road safety plan, 2 of our other additional master plans for downtown and the Broadmoor area, additional studies as they come up, and of course, public feedback. We are planning to provide and guide development to a coordinated transportation system for a growing Pasco. As we know, we're growing very quickly. Along with keeping up with capacity demand of a growing city, the proposed plan includes various multimodal transportation projects with an emphasis on bike and pedestrian facilities, safety, and neighborhood calming, traffic calming measures. Last year, we revised the usability of the plan to divide it up into 5 different zones, just based off of the geography of the city, to try and help people find the projects that may be in their own neighborhood, and identify where they're located based on number. This year, we tried to improve usability even further. We were able to develop an interactive web-based map, or a story map, and we brought our mapping efforts in-house. Previous years, we were using a consultant to do the mapping efforts. This year, our GIS department did the mapping efforts, including the interactive map. So definitely a special thank you to Caleb Kaufman, Ed DeVoe, and Richard Allen for creating the interactive map. I'll come back to that. So these were projects that were removed from last year's TIP because they're either completed or planned to be completed by the end of the year. Our annual pavement preservation, the Court Street overlay, the Oregon Avenue overlay, the 8th Street Heritage Boulevard intersection improvements, the Court Street overlay, a different section of Court Street, and the Argent Road widening, which we heard about earlier today with the bid acceptance. We have 15 new projects this year, which we can roll through some of those when we get to the map. A lot of different intersections improvements as we've been reviewing the traffic needs as development occurs. So installing a lot of, for new projects, traffic lights at various intersections. We have a couple roadway extensions and a couple projects over in the Broadmoor area. So if this works, we'll see. Uh-oh. I don't know if it was obvious in the agenda packet or you had a chance to navigate on the interactive map before, but this is what the interactive map looks like. So you can see the different zones, and as you scroll through, it'll identify descriptions of each project over to the left, and we can click to different regions. We can click on different projects within the region. and it'll bring up all the information that was included in the tip. So this is just another map, which once it's adopted, we will post on the city website. So it's more usable for the public and for council. If there are any particular projects that are of interest, I can go over those. I can talk about some of the new projects. That's the majority of the presentation. Happy to discuss.
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions? Councilman Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Bracken. This is, I think, probably one of the questions I field the most as a council member is always, what's going on over there? And, you know, we're processing so much information. It's easy to forget a lot of times, like, oh, I think we talked about this, like the Court Street stuff. I'll be honest. It slipped my mind on really what was even going on. I was like, I know for a fact that I probably approved a budget, and I know that somebody probably put a presentation in front of me, but I moved past that. So having a tool like this is going to be really awesome to be able to direct people to say, hey, you know, if you're curious about what's going on in your area or throughout the city, that you can click on it and it tells you, you know, the estimated budget for it.
Right.
One question I have, and this is more philosophical, but obviously, so we put together our transportation master plan. You know, how do they work together? So we take, and this is more for general information for the public, but we take our transportation master plan and use that as a tool to then also come up with this, right? Like you said, with council goals, et cetera. If you could elaborate on that just a little bit on what process you guys go through to kind of come up with that, that would be awesome.
Yes, the large majority of the projects that are included in this tip were also included in the transportation system master plan. There are more projects on the transportation system master plan that's not in the tip either yet or, you know, wasn't in terms of what we are seeing and for development the biggest priority so far. Again, this takes us through the next 6 years, and it gets updated at least every year. It has to be updated every year. It can be updated more often than that. But yes, so between those and other studies and our downtown master plan, which looks at things other than just transportation needs, and the Broadmoor master plan, which the TSMP touched on, but it was not as well developed until we had the Broadmoor master plan, and that's how they get pulled in and rolled into what's included here.
Okay, great. I do have on one I want you to elaborate on is the progress of the Road 100 interchange project. So I think if I was remembering and tracking some of that progress, we are in phase 1 where a lot of the planning, we're not planning on breaking ground for a while, but clicking on the GIS map, I'm seeing that we're working on some of the road widening. So if you could just give a quick deep dive into what that looks like and what our timeline is right now, that would be cool.
Sure. So to clarify, you mean the 3 projects associated with the interchange, and then I'm not sure if you're talking about 100 going north or just specifically the interchange.
Let's just talk about the interchange.
Oh, the interchange, sure. So there are 3 projects included with that. 6.01, which is the eastbound improvements, is a current CIP project and underway. Steve, I don't know if you want to give an update on that one specifically, not to put you on the spot.
I'd be happy to. That particular project actually went to advertisement for bids last Friday. So the bid opening on that is scheduled now for June 22nd. So we anticipate getting calls from contractors asking questions and that kind of stuff. So it is moving forward.
Very cool. Cool. Thank you.
And then the other 2 parts of that overall project is a pedestrian bridge and then the westbound improvements, which is scheduled for much further out, a few years out, and will be monitored in terms of how soon we may need it and should that have to change.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney and then Councilman Milne.
All right, thank you. So a couple questions, and I love this tool. I love the accessibility of this. I mean, we get questions all the time, not just about what is the status of something, but I don't like how something is in my neighborhood because for a variety of really good reasons. And this hopefully will help be a spot where that the public can stop and say, okay, so what is coming in my and where?
Yep.
And I would certainly ask all the public, anybody who's paying attention, we have time to make some modifications to the timing and expected planning of this. Come talk to us. The window's pretty short, and for 2 weeks we're going to have to be approving this to meet our statutory requirements. But but I'm about to ask for stuff, and I'm sure that with the public, I'll be happy to help bring that forward to make sure that staff's considering, some changes to this if necessary. So 2 comments more specifically. So one thing we've talked about as part of the master plan for downtown, as well as a variety of other ways of connecting our community to the river, are those bike and pedestrian facilities. So from downtown, for example, one of the things that we've talked about repeatedly is how do we get bike and ped access along probably 4th, coming right into downtown. That's not on this plan at this point in time. Is it? I'm going to say I think it should be with all the work we're doing in downtown, linking the ability to get people who are already on the bike path on the Heritage Trail around the river to be able to just come up on North on Saturdays to come to our farmers market to do other things just makes a world of sense. Right now, there isn't a clear, safe, low stress way for someone on a bicycle to get up to our downtown. So I would like to see that something like that come into this. And if you're telling me it's not going to be in the next 6 years, I'll not going to not approve this because of that. But I'd really like an explanation and understanding of how does this fit together? How is this integrating with our downtown master plan? The other one is in your introductory comments, you mentioned traffic calming. And obviously we just had a forum about traffic safety and speeding and how that's impacting people's safety and perception of safety in their neighborhoods. And frankly, we've been talking about this since I got on. I haven't actually seen any meaningful traffic calming done in the city of Pasco, at least not what I see in other areas, especially in neighborhoods. There's no no changes that cause people to slow down through a residential neighborhood. I have a lot of areas in my portion of town where the streets are so close together and there are no driveways that it's hard for 2 vehicles to pass each other, and you'll have someone flying down at 40 miles an hour down that street. We have not implemented the sort of traffic calming that I've expected, and that after 5.5 years of being on here and asking for it, I'm still not seeing that this plan is addressing. So this is at a very high level, and maybe it does address it. So could you talk to me at all about actual traffic calming that is implemented in this tip? Or we can kick it over to Steve if you want me to yell at him instead.
Well, I'll start and then I'll kick it over to Steve. A few of the projects that are included is the Sylvester Street safety improvements. So that includes a lot of curb bulb outs within this defined central area and also south. We did add a Court Street project, which will kind of combines 2 of the things you mentioned, traffic calming, Court Street over to Define. It's quite a long road. So sometimes it takes a second to load, but from Harris down to approximately Road 96 to improve and define actual bike and pedestrian facilities there, which would be a natural traffic calming device, along with some other strategies that could be implemented. And the other thing that would do is as Broadmoor gets developed with the bike and ped infrastructure that we're planning for, it connects Broadmoor to the trail, the riverfront trail you were talking about. You made a good point about doing the same for downtown, and it is in the works. It's not specifically called out as a plan. There are, I believe, some a striped bike lane on 4th, but it's not great. So it's well noted that a connection from the bike trail to downtown is a worthy priority.
So are we going to see any traffic calming in our neighborhoods?
Within specific neighborhoods?
Yeah, because we're talking about Sylvester, we're talking about Court Street, and those are important, but they're certainly not where the majority of people spend their time, right? There's a lot of traffic where kids are out, playing, and kids are walking, and we're not seeing the traffic calming around there.
Right.
So we've talked again. I've been asking about this and talking about this since I joined council. Either little not a true traffic like a roundabout, but like little traffic circles or cutouts of the sidewalks, other things. I just have yet to see any of them implemented, including around our schools.
Yeah.
Right there, I'm right there next to Emerson Elementary, and there is the speed at which traffic is going down my street is absurd. I'm sitting down in my basement, and I can hear them. I swear I can almost sometimes feel the wind of them driving past. So I'm very concerned about this. We're seeing a lot of community concerns about our safety, and I would like some more information as to how this implements those sort of vision of community safety for our streets. So If not right in a second, please, if there's some follow-up I could get by before we approve this, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure, we can definitely do that. I know some of these projects were informed from the local road safety plan. They don't include every neighborhood street, of course, to be studied, but as those are identified, and that's something that we're definitely taking into consideration as we're looking at new developments coming in. That's the easiest way to implement it is before it becomes a problem, of course, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking at what we already have.
Yeah, I was going to add the new development projects certainly not only with regards to traffic calming measures or projects, not only are additions to those potential new projects, but they're also taking into consideration their impact on surrounding neighborhoods and uses such as school districts, school properties, public parks, et cetera. So as we look at new development, particularly infill, it's also an opportunity for us to take a look at what that new development may do to surrounding neighborhoods and where there's an opportunity to mitigate potential safety risk, taking a look at what was reviewed and evaluated as part of the local road safety plan and also the recommendations from the transportation plan to find out where there's some opportunities to begin starting a neighborhood traffic calming measure program. And I think we can certainly go back amongst ourselves as staff and identify how we can begin using the 6-year tip to implement and create a traffic calming measure program, and then working with council to identify how we prioritize neighborhoods for that program.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilman Milne?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question for you. So I know on Sylvester we've talked about, it's going from 4 lanes down to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then on section 4.05, you have to hear that Road 40 on Court Street to 68 is also going down to 3 lanes. And I mean, you have, more people, we have more infill in a lot of the donut hole areas. Why would we be switching? I mean, a lot of times I get stuck behind cars that are going slow, and so it's nice to go around them on Court Street. Why are we moving? I understand Sylvester, but why are we moving also Court pretty much in the same area in a way down to 3 lanes? I mean, isn't that going to be more bottleneck the traffic, especially in like events like the 4th of July or the boat races? Is there a reason why we're doing both? I could see one. I just seems like doing both at the exact same or in the same time just seems kind of like we're strangling traffic, not making flow easier. Can you
Right.
kind of give an idea why that is?
Sure, and we did somewhat purposely phase Court Street a little bit behind Sylvester to learn from that project. From a traffic capacity standpoint, a 3-lane road is not very much different than a 4-lane road, and it's significantly safer because you don't have folks who are trying to make a left-hand turn stopping in a travel lane. So there's not that kind of unexpected if you're traveling down one of the center lanes and someone stops to make a left-hand turn, but you kind of are considering this a through lane, that unexpected transition doesn't happen as much, and you're not crossing 2 lanes of traffic to make your left-hand turn, you're only crossing 1. So that's a 4-lane road often ends up acting like a 3-lane road, 1 in each direction with 2 center turn lanes instead of a combined center turn lane.
Okay. Guess it kind of explains it. And then on where we have 68 in Court, I know there's the roundabout, and I know we've did a lot of that to get the land, and it says 24 to 29. Can you kind of give me like an exact or more of an exact? Are we talking the early 24, 25, or are we talking like later as far as the roundabout that's going to be there?
In terms of timing?
Yes, in timing, yeah.
I think it is scheduled to begin construction next year. I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't have every 77 project memorized, but and could likely trickle into construction the following year. Is that correct, Steve?
By the way, you're doing a great job answering all these questions. Really, really good. That project is about ready to go out to bid. The one question I think that we brought up previously is we're getting to the point where we're late enough in the year whether or not we're going to be able to finish it. Mm-hmm. So we want to be careful not to tear up the intersection if we can't get it paved out before winter comes. And so we are still evaluating that, and if it looks like we'll be able to do it, we will certainly get it out to bid. But as I understand it is ready to go out to bid.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I know I've heard talk about like on Road 100 in Court where I live that like a possible smaller roundabout. Was that just a rumor, or is that actually, a work?
That is something that is planned to be studied with that Court Street project that I was talking about. It would include sidewalks, is also intersection treatments. I believe the TSMP calls out a couple different solutions. It might specify a roundabout, but whether it's a traffic light or a roundabout and when it should be installed is something that we would look at when we're designing and scoping that Court Street improvement.
Okay, and then I guess the last thing, just more of a statement. Also going off what Mayor Pro Tem Maloney is talking about as far as whether we do lights or something. I know we've had quite a good discussion a month ago or whatever it was about the speed bumps, but I can tell you from, the 182 bridge to Road 100 and beyond, it seems like it's a racetrack with some of the bikes, and it's not my bike, and certain cars. I don't know if, again, it'd be nice if we could do something before somebody really gets nailed and killed. Because, you see a lot of bicyclists, you see a lot of people running down that way, and it's just scary when you see a guy doing, I've heard 50, but I've definitely seen people do over 70. But again, by the time if you were to call Pasco PD, they're long gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we could do lights or something, but something to slow people down, or it says, bikes or kids present, or just something. I know it's hard, seeing, it just seems like it gets worse every year. And just like, the people that live out there, it's very disheartening to hear somebody go, wow, right by, and that guy's doing well in excess of 70 at times. So just throwing that out there that I know all neighborhoods are important here in Pasco, but when you're talking those kind of speeds and that long of a straightaway with no lights, it gives people the opportunity. You don't hit a light all the way till you get closer to the other, as in 395. So it's nice if you're going home, but it's also bad if you're hearing the racing going on. So
Right, for sure.
So thank you on that.
Director Worley, do you have comments?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just add a little bit to what Jessica was saying earlier. There is a lot of work going on at the moment in many different areas related to safety throughout the city. Jessica mentioned the local road safety plan is one of them. We've done 3 of those now, and they've identified projects that are high priority in terms of making them safer, and that's all based on crash data that we've been getting from WSDOT. And we have been very successful at getting grant money to address some of those. One of the things that we got that is going to help with some traffic calming, at least on a macro scale, is the fact that we're going to do a speed study throughout the entire city. We think there's some, changes that could be made and some consistency that could be provided that would allow us to be able to look more favorably at how to slow traffic down in some of our neighborhoods. We've got the Sylvester Street Safety Project, which is going to be a huge success. That was based on some complaints that we've had for traffic calming. And then we've done a lot of speed studies on different areas of the city, just in terms of measuring how fast some of the people are going. And each time we do one of those, we have our traffic engineer consultant look at it, and he's able to look at things that we don't normally look at and has very good recommendations on things that we can do. And sometimes just, controlling the speeds of people and adding more informative signs helps a lot. So I understand the need to do it, and we're still focused on it. We're building a plethora of information to help prepare that citywide traffic calming study that you've been wanting for so long. So we're building up to it.
Thank you for that. Any further questions or comments from council? Ms. Bracken, if you'd like to continue.
That's, I was going to mention the 2 other projects that were pedestrian crossing projects that I know Public Works was successful getting grants for as another good traffic calming measures. Those are listed here and will be completed in the next 2 years. So that's another that fit into that category. But if there are no other specific questions on projects or anything else, then that's all I have.
It seems that you did a very excellent job at explaining everything that's going on, and I really love that new feature, so we can see the progress of the projects. With no other questions or comments from council, thank you.
Great.
So moving on to our next item on the agenda is discussion of second engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 5536, and we have Mr. Ferguson for that.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we talked last time, it was kind of on the eve of the special session that was going to be forthcoming, and it looks like the legislature did meet and tried to adopt what's affectionately referred to as the quote Blake fix. So easy for me to say, and I don't know that I would say that that's exactly what happened. I think it's more of a Blake improvement. And so, but as is often the case, it's legislation, so there's a lot of compromise. So anyway, long and short of it is just wanted to come back and say that essentially the bill, as we kind of went through kind of topically last time, is essentially what was adopted. We can go through just the highlights of it real quick, just to kind of give you a little overview. There are some still outstanding concerns that we're still going to have to try to address, and I'll just mention those briefly. But long and short of it is what we anticipated was going to be the case, that both possession and use of controlled substances and counterfeit substances, which is fentanyl specifically, because it's obviously not it's man-made, and as well as use, have both become gross misdemeanors again. They were originally felonies. Now, then they went down to misdemeanors, and then you had to have 2 priors essentially to actually be prosecuted. Now it's a gross misdemeanor. The non-prescribed legend drugs, which are pharmaceutical drugs without a prescription, those are misdemeanors, both possession and use of that. The no referral option is in place so that prosecutors have to agree to have somebody be able to go through a diversion process, which was not the case or hasn't been the case the last couple of years, which caused a lot of backlog with regard to being able to move forward. The state did fully and entirely preempt drug paraphernalia regulation. That means both not only regulation but penalties. So whereas it's kind of a nuance, but essentially the possession and use portion, the penalties have been preempted, but not necessarily the regulation. So we could still have our own local regulations. The penalties would have to model the state law. Drug paraphernalia, we have no authority to do anything other than exactly what the state has done. So that is a total and complete preemption there. The other things that I just wanted to highlight real quick were the ordinances that a lot of folks, that we talked about this a little bit last time, a lot of the ordinances that folks passed in fear of the prior statute expiring really won't have a whole lot of effect, because, as I said before, the ability for the penalties will have to model state law. So that's essentially those will, in most cases, will be moot. We will need to decide how we go forward, if and how we go forward adopting locally. We do have to either have our own code provision, PMC, or we can adopt the state law by reference. So, but we have to do one or the other. So we're still trying to parse out exactly what that looks like, and the goal is to work with the chiefs and sheriffs and make sure that we're all, and the prosecutors, and make sure we're all on the same page with regard to a regional approach for that. The other things are a lot of minutia. It's a 49-page bill, so if you're having trouble sleeping at all, I highly recommend it. It'll fix the problem, but yeah, it's a lot of nuance. So, but I'll try to answer any questions. The big concerns outlying issues that we're having is with regard to effective dates. There's some clunky language about when the old law expires and when the 2 referral process actually ends in mid-August, and then certain things in this take place in stages, some July 1, some July 2023, something, I believe. So it's not quite clear yet. We are attending tomorrow program debrief put on by AWC and the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. Myself and some folks from the police department will be attending that just to try to get a sense of what that looks like statewide. But I would anticipate through the summer this would get ironed out and implemented. So happy to try to answer any questions, but it's there's a lot there.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson, for the recommendation on the, for those of us have issues sleeping. Councilman Campos, you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank Chief Roski for the update you provided about Peanuts Park over the weekend. Thank you for you and your team for handling business in the manner that you did. I think that area was needing some special attention, and it got it. Overall, I think we asked Deputy Cook kind of what his thoughts are, but this came at 0 hour, and I don't know that your department had a chance to review things. So I just was hoping to get your feedback from a personal level. How are you feeling about the decision, and are you looking, again, you don't have to, I'm gonna be transparent here. Are you looking for council to workshop and massage this a little bit more? Or is that what your ultimate hope is?
Yeah, thank you. I think we need to get through some legal analysis. Tomorrow will help. The attorneys, our attorney and the Tri-City Metro-wide attorneys are all trying to make sure they get their minds around this so we have a unified adoption of what those might look like. Is where we are today, or August, I guess, where we are in August, better than where we are today? Absolutely. Are there some fixes that need to continue to be tweaked? Absolutely. But I think I'm encouraged by what we have in front of us, and we have good legal minds ready to get ordinances in front of you to adopt, so we have a uniformed approach.
Great, that adds clarity, and again, I just want to kind of pat everybody on the back here. I think we do really well at this level working regionally. I can't say for certain because I don't have a lot of experience with other regional municipalities, but it feels like we work really well with our sister city across the river and the other localities. So I'm just really proud to be a part of this community and look forward to making it a safer place.
Thank you. Mayor Protem Maloney, and then Councilman Milne.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson, for bringing this up, and thank you, Chief Roski, for weighing in as well. I know there's more to come on this. One thing, Mr. Ferguson, you sent us was the MRSC's we'll say, call it an overview, not an interpretation, but an overview of this. And one of the things I'm just going to read verbatim out of here because it was really striking to me, and I want to understand this a little bit further. And if it's not today, I would like to understand it soon when we know more collectively. It writes, in part, under local government ordinances, many Washington cities and counties have passed ordinances regulating drug possession and use in the absence of permanent state legislation. Those ordinances no longer have any real effect because the state fully occupies and preempts the entire field of setting penalties for violations of the Controlled Substances Act, and local ordinances must be consistent with Chapter 69.50 RCW. As described in the previous blog section, the state also preempts the field of drug paraphernalia regulation. So how much space is there? I know that was an early interpretation, and they're not our lawyer. They're a lawyer that's writing an interpretation. How much space is there at this point in time to work with this versus does our focus need to be more around how diversion programs and things around the edges where we have some ability to try to make some difference?
Yeah, so that's where they're trying to draw this distinction, and there is a lot of information that's flying around in terms of how that's going to be interpreted. And essentially what it comes down to is the possession and use component of this law. The penalties section has been completely preempted. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the substance of the violation, the regulation itself, has been preempted. So any penalty that you associate, and the way I'm interpreting that, and and I want to be very careful here that saying that this is just a high overview opinion of this, but it sounds like what they're saying is that we have to make sure that whatever penalty we associate with this is consistent with state law, but that the regulation could be different than what the state law currently has. So in other words, the details about what controlled substance or those types of counterfeit drugs, those types of things, there may be some ability to tweak those things, whereas the penalty provision will still have to be maintained consistent with state law. Drug paraphernalia is completely and entirely both the violations are all the regulations that we would be able to enforce, as well as the penalties. So that one is completely off the table, but the question really is how much and to what degree could you get creative with regard to regulation, notwithstanding the fact that we know that you couldn't make the penalty harsher than what the state law is, because you can't go beyond that.
Okay, I appreciate that. So my layman's interpretation of that is we couldn't take this from a gross misdemeanor to a felony. That's not an option we have. But there might be what classifications fall into that penalty, which penalties are prescribed by state law. Maybe there's some room to work with. But there's more to come on that. Nothing's firm on that.
Right.
Sure
Just
yet.
to be a little more precise, we wouldn't be able to do anything with regard to a felony as a municipality because we're limited, a court of limited jurisdiction. But one of the things that that would be interesting is that we couldn't take, this is a gross misdemeanor light, for lack of a better expression, because it only has a 180-day maximum and a $1,000 fine, whereas a typical gross misdemeanor under state law is a 364-day penalty and $5,000. So we couldn't go full-on gross misdemeanor because we're going to be limited by the same penalty as they are. And I think that's why that's why they made sure that language was in there, because they wanted to make sure that certain jurisdictions didn't go beyond what that 180-day requirement would be, but that other jurisdictions could change what they would interpret as wanting to regulate.
Great, thank you for all of that. So it sounds like we're not going to have a big role to play in a lot of this, but more to come once we have the regional minds put their heads together and figure out what space that we might be able to collectively operate in and might be interested in operating in. Thank you.
Councilman Milne?
Thank you, Mayor. This is probably more directed towards Chief Roski. As you know, we've put millions of dollars into Peanuts Plaza. A couple weeks ago, I went down to Vera's Bakery, get some donuts, good stuff. And when I was down there, I saw, of course, this is before you did your undercover thing, but there was a group of people behind the bakery smoking or doing something, but they were pretty high. And then when I was walking through Peanuts Plaza back to my truck, I noticed that there's probably about 15, I think I counted 15 to 17 people that were either passed out, so I don't know if they were on drugs, I didn't go up to them directly, or they were like sleeping in the vicinity of that whole area. What are your thoughts? I know like City of Kennewick has put like an ordinance where you can't sleep in a certain area. Now we're going to have a cannabis buffer zone. Do you think it would be wise to look into something like that? Because, I mean, as a person with my money, it really didn't look good when I was, I'll let you talk, I guess. I would say it didn't sit well that so many people were down there lying down on the ground, and didn't really make me want to spend my money in that area. But I try to.
Yeah, thank you. So there are certainly a lot of challenges. We are coming out of a couple of year experiment of what do we allow with mental health, substance abuse, do we legalize everything, right? So we kind of been on this road for a couple of years. It's going to be extremely expensive, and it's not going to be able to turn around overnight as we try and regain control and public safety of our communities. Again, Peanuts Park only being one area of that, but we are committed to that. We put some resources down there. The drug piece of that is still a few months out. I mentioned I like where we're going with it. I like what the state is allowing us to do, but we're a couple months out. There are some things though that we are doing now. One of those is trespassing. We're firming up what that looks like at like Peanuts Park and enforcement and making arrests for people that keep violating that. The sleeping ordinance that we have on the books, we are reviewing now with legal to see if it's still constitutionally valid, and a whole host of other municipal ordinances that have been on the books, but before we start dusting them off, we probably need to make sure from Mr. Ferguson that they're constitutionally sound in today's environment. And if not, we are prepared to tweak those and remodify them so we have all of the tools of ordinances. And at the end of the day, when resources aren't available, when subjects don't want to avail themselves of the referral programs, incarceration is an option for us, and we'll certainly use incarceration if we need to. I don't know if that helps answer or not.
Well, it does in a way. And again, this might be a stupid question, but is panhandling still? Because when I went to the bakery, I was hit up twice there and back from people that wanted money, and then there was like a young gal, like in a blanket, that kept running across the street downtown, and I heard her asking people for money. Is that still like a crime?
Yeah, so that's one of those on the books that we'll be reviewing to see if it's constitutionally valid. Probably that person, there's other ordinances and stuff that we could take action on in the roadway, running around and stuff like that. But those are the whole host of things that need to be reviewed in light of recent court rulings, certainly in the Ninth Circuit, but Washington State Supreme Court. And we'll be looking at all those.
Okay. Well, if there's anything I could do as
Mr.
a
Ferguson?
councilman, please let me know.
And just so you know, I am meeting with our prosecutors on Friday, both Mike Rio and Jessica Foltz, and we're going to be discussing exactly what our approach is. And then Ms. Foltz is actually going to be here at our workshop on the 12th. And one of the goals will be to kind of lay out what are the current code provisions that we have that are effective, not effective, and then how do we want to do this from a comprehensive. Now that we know what the ability to enforce possession and use with regard to drugs, now that we know what that is going to look like, that now gives us a little bit more to go on so that we can look at the other issues with regard to sleeping in the right of way, camping in parks. There's been folks have made told stories about folks parking and living in vehicles. It's going to be a little clunky, or it's going to be a lot clunky, because there are different those rules are made in different ways now. So as the chief alluded to, there's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that's made some decisions with regard to vehicles, living in vehicles, versus the Washington State Supreme Court, who has and so we're trying to kind of piece together, but that's why she'll be here to kind of walk us through from a prosecutor standpoint what we think we can legally go forward with, and kind of look at this more from a holistic perspective.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, and I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I lost my train of thought here. I do want to acknowledge that our police department and fire department are doing their best to help the situations where there's individuals going through a crisis. And, as you know, staff is all working together to make sure that there's ways to help those individuals. But we all know that we don't have all the resources. We don't have enough mental health, behavioral health facilities, detox, all of that. So this is where staff is working together along with the policymakers to figure out the best way to address those situations. And like it was mentioned before, chief department, they're doing, what do we call them? Strategic stings to where those specific areas like Peanuts Park are being addressed, and it's made to where people are not afraid or should not be afraid to come to downtown, especially to the Peanuts Park and utilize those facilities. I mean, we have people coming in from all over the state and outside of the state for a swimming match at Memorial Pool, one of those areas that has also been targeted and focused in. So it's slowly happening, and I would just ask for patience from not only our city or residents. Staff is working hard on this. And I have other comments that I'll add here at miscellaneous discussion that I do want to highlight some of the work that staff is doing. Are there any other questions or comments in regards to this? And Councilwoman Roach, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to call on you. Do you have any questions or comments?
Madam Mayor, you don't have to be sorry. I mean, this is a really, I guess, if I want to have a positive perspective, intriguing conversation and topic that we get to decide on. But I mean, to be honest, I do feel a bit like this is a really big topic to chew on, and so I don't have a comment at this time. I have a lot of questions, but I'm hold off and probably ask them to our legal counsel via email as they come to me, because I don't have a formulated. I feel kind of inundated with a lot of information right now that I haven't been able to digest. So
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm sure you'll reach out to Mr. Ferguson. With that, does anybody need a 5-minute break before we finish this off? We have a need for a 5-minute break to return here at 9:16. And it is 9:17 and we're back from our little 5-minute break. Moving on to our next item on the agenda is 11C, 2023 Washington State Legislative Session Update. Our now City Manager, Adam Lincoln.
So, thank you, Mayor and Council. With us, we have Brianna Murray with Gordon Thomas Honeywell to talk about the extraordinary session that we had, which I think yielded a heck of a lot of positive benefits for the residents of the city of Pasco. Brianna and her cohort, Holly Kochi, are a really great team. I think we're very lucky to have them as our lobbyists. Other cities are certainly envious of the results that they get. And it's been a pleasure to work with them through the sessions that I've been fortunate to work with them. So with that, Brianna is on the line.
Great. Well,
Ms. Murray.
thank you, Adam, for those kind words. So yes, I'm Brianna Murray, and I'm joined by my colleague Holly Kochi. We're with Gordon Thomas Honeywell Government Relations. We're hoping to end your council meeting on a very good and positive, uplifting note as we share with you the outcomes of this last legislative session. Before I turn it over to Holly to really start to dive into the details, I just want to say that being successful in Olympia is really a team effort. It requires you all as elected leaders to set a great agenda with strategic guidance, and for making the trips over to Olympia, making phone calls to legislators, testifying virtually and in person. It takes a lot of work on behalf of your staff. So led by your city manager, Adam Lincoln, but also all the department directors who have been reviewing hundreds of bills to provide us really good input and to provide our legislators really good input. So I just want to say it's a team effort. We happen to be at the tip of the spear during the legislative session over in Olympia doing the on-the-ground lobbying work, but there's a lot of teamwork that goes into the success we're going to share with you this evening. So I think with that note, I'm going to turn it over to Holly as she moves on to the next slide. And we've got a hopefully positive and relatively brief presentation prepared for you. Holly?
Thanks, Brianna. Good to see you all this evening. I'll just start off by reminding you all that you should have received an end of session comprehensive written report. That report, of course, includes the outcome of the city's priorities along with detailed budget summaries and descriptions of each bill that passed the legislature that either have a nexus with issues relating to city function or relate to the city's support opposed document. It's about a 10-page report that I'd encourage you to reference if needed, or if you find that type of read enjoyable, read it in its entirety. It's totally up to you. This evening, so we'll be providing a recap of what is included in that written report, including an overview of the 2023 legislative session, the outcome of the city's legislative priorities, share highlights of additional legislative issues pertaining to the city's support opposed document, which is supplement to the legislative agenda. And then we will wrap up by discussing next steps in preparing for the 2024 session. So we can go on to the next slide. So the 2023 legislative session was the first time the legislature has conducted their work in person in over 2 years. The public was still able to participate virtually through remote testimony at public hearings. But as many of you witnessed when visiting during the session, all legislators were in Olympia, and of course, many lobbyists like Brianna and I were there in person every day. It was the first year of the biennium and was a long session lasting 105 consecutive days. And the primary objective of a long session is to adopt new biennial budgets, which the legislature did so successfully. There were Senate and House committee restructures, really due to the number of new legislators coming into the 2023 session. And some major themes, which you will notice as I go over the budgets in the next slide as well, really included housing, public safety, and behavioral health. And then in addition to adopting budgets, the legislature considered over 2,156 bills and ultimately passed 485. And because this is the first year of the biennium, any bill that did not pass this year is automatically reintroduced and reconsidered next session. For some political context, following the last election cycle, there were 25 new legislators. Of course, the city experienced significant changes in state representation this year due to redistricting, with the 15th and the 8th legislative districts representing Pasco now, several of which were new to the legislature as well. There were new committee chairs and new caucus leadership, all of which really impacted what transpired this session. Democrats held strong majorities in both chambers and set the agenda in terms of what policies they wanted to prioritize. And then following the conclusion of the 2023 session, a special session began and ended on May 16th, which was, as you're all highly aware of, to address the Blake decision. So we can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, the primary objective of the long session is to adopt budgets, so which that includes the operating, capital, and transportation budgets. The operating budget funds all state agency operations, the largest of which is the K-12 education system. The 23-25 operating budget is $69.8 billion with $3.6 billion in reserves, and some noteworthy allocations would include $20 million for grants to local governments for updating and implementing comp plans and development regulations, $150 million to transition individuals living in encampments to housing, over $250 million for various behavioral health services, and $11.3 million for 6 additional BLEA classes at three new regional academies, one of which is located in Pasco. The capital budget funds public and nonprofit construction projects that are non-transportation related. It's a $9 billion budget, primarily funded through the sale of bonds. There's $95 million in remaining bond capacity for a supplemental budget next year. Over $231 million was allocated to local community projects throughout the state. So some major investments within the capital budget include housing and homelessness, behavioral health, and education. And then the third and final budget is the transportation budget. It's a $13.5 billion budget and is the first biennium for the implementation of the Move Ahead Washington package, which passed in 2022. For the most part, the legislature was able to honor previous commitments made within the Connecting Washington package and the Move Ahead Washington package, and provided a phasing of funds over the next 6 years or so to provide some predictability on project planning. This was also the first budget to incorporate Climate Commitment Act revenues, which are scattered throughout all the 3 budgets. And that money must be spent on carbon reducing programs and projects. Revenues that fund the transportation budget, primarily the gas tax, are continuing to decline, and the legislature has not yet identified a path forward on a revenue source that can eventually replace this gradually declining gas tax revenue. And then given the budget constraints, workforce shortages, and the concern for WashDOT's ability to complete projects that have been promised within previous transportation packages, the governor vocalized his concerns with the budget the legislature developed this session and vetoed several aspects that would have added new projects to WashDOT's plate, which one definitely impacted Pasco, which I'll dive into later. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So moving on to discuss the outcome of the city's legislative priorities for this session. To start, the city requested 4 different project investments within the state capital budget. The first being a $5 million request for Pasco's processed water reuse facility. This was a large request that required strong support from all 6 of Pasco's legislators. And it also required support from those across the aisle, which the city cultivated by informing other legislators throughout the state on the environmental benefits of this project. Huge kudos to Mr. Worley and the Public Works team for developing super great content for this project, especially the short video that made it much, much easier to understand the complexities of this project. So thank you for all that work. Ultimately, the state appropriated $5 million for this project, which derives actually from the Climate Commitment Act dollars I mentioned earlier on. So overall, a huge, huge success. But of course, the city accomplished much, much more this session. The capital budget also includes $155,000. It should not say million. I apologize. That is my error. But we have so many good things. I hope this isn't a downer, but $155,000 for renovations to the downtown plaza area. This project and the processed water reuse facility project are both located within the 15th legislative district. So Senator Torres, Rep. Sandlin, and Rep. Chandler really took the lead on advocating for both requests. Pasco's original request for the downtown plaza was $750,000. However, there's really only so much funding each legislative delegation has to work with and spread throughout the district. So the downtown plaza received a portion of the funds requested, resulting in $155,000. Next is the $3 million for Giza Stadium. The city, along with several other communities throughout the state, requested a total of $24 million to improve publicly owned minor league baseball stadiums. So that full $24 million was included in the final budget, which means Pasco will receive the full $3 million requested. And then lastly, the city requested $750,000 to support the turfing of the championship field at Burden Boulevard soccer fields. This request was not originally included in the city's legislative agenda. However, Rep. Bernard from the 8th legislative delegation asked the city a few weeks into session whether there was a Pasco project located in the 8th that she could advocate for. So the city worked to develop this request, which Senator Banky championed in the Senate, and of course Rep. Bernard did in the House. And all in all, $750,000 was included in the final budget. So to say this year for Pasco was a success is really an understatement. The city had an amazing legislative year, and to even put it into further perspective, in total capital budget funding, the city received $8.905 million. 3 out of 4 were over the average local community appropriation, which was $700,000 this year. So overall, significant state investments were made in Pasco this session. We can
Holly, if I can just chime in, I want to add two other takeaways from this slide. One is, after redistricting, we had advocated through the redistricting process to not have Pasco split along east and west lines. And the result of redistricting was somewhat surprising, as we still saw that split, but we had 2 new legislative districts. And I just want to note that your legislators from the 8th and the 15th really embraced Pasco with a zealousness that this list of successes reflects. They all reached out to us, not just on these issues, but many other issues, and I think took care of Pasco incredibly well. The second thing I want to say is not every year is going to be like this. So take this for the success that it is, and don't expect this every single year, particularly as we look to next year, it being a short session and the second year of the biennium. These same funding opportunities are not going to exist. And in a lot of ways, this was the stars aligning in a lot of perfect ways with new legislators, the perfect projects, the right buckets of money. So great success. We should absolutely celebrate it. Also, don't hold us to the standard every year moving forward. Go ahead, Holly. Back to you.
All right, next slide, please. So we'll jump into our transportation priorities, and securing transportation funding has certainly come with its challenges, but the city continues to share the need for state investments in this arena, really emphasizing projects that would improve safety and mobility, which really speaks to the transportation priorities the legislature has aimed to address. So I'll quickly run through the 4 projects that the city requested funding for. $3 million for the Road 76 overcrossing, $8 million for Broadmoor bike ped crossing over I-182, $1.5 million for SR12 safety improvements, and $2 million for an access revision report for US 395 and I-182. So the legislature had included one of the 4 projects within the budget, which was $1.5 million for SR12 safety improvements. However, this project, along with a handful of other newly identified projects throughout the state, were vetoed by the governor, meaning this project is no longer included in the final budget. As I had mentioned previously, the depleting transportation budget had legislators really struggling to figure out how to even honor the previous project commitments within the previous packages. And the governor's reasoning for removing this project, along with several others from the budget, really stems from the funding challenges and Washout's ability to get the work done. So overall, a very challenging time for any new transportation projects around the state. And it is unlikely that until the legislature identifies a way to replace gas tax revenues, it will certainly continue to be a battle. Not one that we can't win with persistence, but it certainly is going to be a battle for the next several years. And on a more positive note, the city will be taking legislators on a transportation tour this week, which will hopefully provide the new legislators an opportunity to dive a bit deeper on the city's transportation needs. And then additionally, and as Mr. Worley mentioned earlier in the meeting, the legislature adequately funded both the Safe Routes to School and Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Grant Program, which means the city will receive funding support for 2 projects they had applied for. So congrats on that. And with that, I think we can move on to the next slide, and Brianna will take it from here.
Sure. So thank you, Holly. Great job recapping the funding requests. The funding requests are really where you see a lot of return for investment and engagement in Olympia and government relations services. But this session, we also saw a lot of activity occur on the policy front, and Pasco was very engaged on the policy front. I think Pasco brought a meaningful voice, excellent information, great subject matter expertise, and all of that fed into the overall legislative dialogue. And as a result, there were some great efforts made and progress made on the policy side of things. Starting first with one of the priorities that you all identified going into the legislative session, which was asking the legislature to make progress on public safety and behavioral health. As Holly mentioned in her overview of the operating budget, the state operating budget allocated funding to a regional training academy in Pasco. And I just have to give kudos to Chief Roski, because it was really his efforts with the Criminal Justice Training Commission that allowed for that funding to come about. As the city's lobbying team, we sort of like checked in on it with legislative staff, but Chief Roski's efforts are really what made that happen. Also, on the public safety front were 2 big policy changes. You heard about one of those in greater detail or just prior to our presentation, and that's Senate Bill 5536, the possession of controlled substances. I want to offer some political commentary, and that's that the bill that was considered at the end of the legislative session compared to the bill that passed during the special session, there was dramatic improvement over that 2-week period in the quality of the bill. And while the bill that the legislature approved is not perfect in everyone's mind and probably needs some more technical changes, it is a significant improvement over that 2-week period. So while going into a 1-day special session is certainly not my most favorite thing to do with the start of my spring and summer, I do think that it resulted in better public policy from a city perspective. The second bill that the legislature passed during the regular legislative session was regarding vehicular pursuits. In 2021, the legislature changed the threshold when officers can engage in a vehicular pursuit. Following that change, there was a lot of public concern about the number of cars who were eluding officers. And that prompted the legislature to revisit that policy this year and restore the previous standard for officers to pursue in certain circumstances, not all. And those are listed there on the screen. I will note that one of the crimes that was discussed in particular was whether or not officers should be allowed to pursue at that lower standard for stolen vehicles. And that was not included in the list of crimes in the bill that was approved, but it is something that I think will likely come up in a future legislative session. In addition to those two very large policy changes, the legislature also allocated a significant amount of money for alternative response teams and treatment facilities, recognizing that law enforcement is really being asked to do a job far beyond public safety and managing a lot of mental health issues. So as those response teams and treatment facilities get built out, the hope is that the behavioral health system will handle more of those issues rather than law enforcement. So I think I'll conclude that summary there and move on to the next slide, which was another hot topic for the 2023 session, housing. Going into the legislative session, there were a lot of legislators, particularly Democrats, who declared the 2023 session as the year of housing. And so there was a lot of bills introduced, well over 36 bills introduced, a lot of discussion about revenue allocations, and a lot of emphasis on housing. At the end of the day, the legislature allocated $1 billion in various housing programs through the operating and capital budget. That includes funding to actually construct housing units, as well as funding for transitioning individuals who are currently living in the right-of-way into permanent supportive housing. There was an effort to make it easier in our state to construct condominiums. I know this is a topic that came up, I think, in Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's conversations with AWC, and the legislature responded by passing 2 bills to address liability and other issues to help spur condominium construction. You may recall the legislature did a similar effort a few years ago and launched a condominium liability reform bill that didn't make a difference in condominium construction. I think everyone is anxiously waiting to see whether the 2 bills that were passed this session will move the needle to allow condominiums to be constructed in Washington state. The other thing that happened in the housing dialogue is a lot of attention was given to cities, and an argument being made that cities are not doing enough to amend their local regulations to allow developers to build housing, whether that is duplexes, triplexes, courtyard apartments, accessory dwelling units, or converting existing buildings into housing. So the legislature passed a whole litany of about a dozen bills aimed at mandating cities to loosen their regulations. Pasco was really uniquely positioned in this conversation because you all have already done the hard work. You all have already taken many of these tough decisions to change your zoning code, to allow duplexes, triplexes, to eliminate exclusively single-family zoning in much of the city. And so it was a really interesting dialogue with the legislature on your behalf. They created within some of these bills some pathways where Pasco could consider complying by getting approval from Department of Commerce for having already done the work. And in other areas, the city will need to amend local codes in order to comply. One thing that we were able to get integrated into all of the bills is that the obligation to require comply with these new mandates doesn't go in effect until 6 months following your next comp plan update. So there is some time for you to consider these changes and figure out how to integrate them into city code. I want to give a special call out to Jacob Gonzalez, who reviewed a lot of different drafts of these bills and provided a lot of feedback throughout the legislative session. And I also want to give a call out to Representative April Connors, who sits on the House Housing Committee and was particularly engaged on many of these issues in a leadership manner. So all in all, the legislature took a lot of action. They lived up to calling 2023 the year of housing, and I think Pasco made a good name for itself in being a leader amongst cities. Can move on to the next slide. We always talk about state shared revenues. This is just a quick reminder that the state operating budget includes several accounts where a portion of those accounts are remitted back to cities. The legislature has dipped into and cut these accounts on other years. This year, I'm pleased to report that they fully funded and in some cases slightly increased the amount of money in these accounts. And so that is a great win on an item that sometimes we lose at. So next slide. One of the areas we engaged was in the Voting Rights Act. There was a bill proposed, House Bill 1048, that proposed modifying the Washington State Voting Rights Act, which was put in place several years ago. Initially we took a position of other. We requested some amendments, and the mayor generously dedicated a fair amount of time to testifying. Your city attorney spent a fair amount of time reviewing various versions of the bill. And we requested, I think it was 3 or 4 different amendments. At the end of the day, we were able to get 1 or 2 of those amendments. All along, our position was we're not opposed to modifications to the Voting Rights Act, but we do want to make sure that the way in which that it is amended is thoughtful and doesn't significantly increase liability. The final bill, the crux of it is that it allows an organization to bring forward a cause of action if the organization has a member who resides within the jurisdiction. So for example, if the ACLU is going to bring forward a case, ACLU has to demonstrate that they have a member who lives in the city of Pasco if they're going to bring forward that case. And then a plaintiff who files a notice of intent can actually recover their costs of up to $50,000, even if the jurisdiction adopts the remedy that they propose in their notice of intent that they're going to bring a cause of action. So the bill overall allows plaintiffs to receive cost recovery for not necessarily winning a case, just raising an issue. And we pushed back on that and tried to limit the liability there as much as we could, and got some modest changes. It is still an increase in liability, but I think we made a change with our meaningful engagement. Next slide. The city has utilized tax increment funding for your redevelopment, and the legislature approved that tool in 2021. One of the things that has come about since the new law was put into place, in part through Pasco's experience with the Broadmoor area, is that there were some technical changes that were needed to the statute, and in particular, the ability to allow TIF revenues to be spent on state-owned facilities as well as locally owned facilities. And that change is particularly important for Broadmoor. So we worked with other stakeholders on the development and introduction of that legislation, and it passed into law this session. So another great success. Next slide. And this one, I don't know why we ended with this one other than maybe alphabetical order, because this was probably the one issue that we didn't make significant progress on and we'll be revisiting in future years. Senator Torres introduced the bill at the request of Columbia Snake River Irrigators Association, Franklin Conservation District, and the city. And the bill didn't go anywhere this session, but it did prompt additional dialogue with ecology and with others. And so we didn't expect this bill to pass, and it did prompt that dialogue, and I do think we will be revisiting this issue in future legislative sessions. And so that concludes a brief overview on policy statements. Holly mentioned earlier that we provided you with a comprehensive written report. Would direct you to that for more details. I think we'll transition to the next slide, where we'll start talking about next steps. So we already have our eyes on the 2024 legislative session and are beginning to prepare for that session. I'll note that the Association of Washington Cities has already begun their legislative agenda setting process for the 2024 session. The 2024 session will be a 60-day session, so a short session. It is the second year of the 2-year biennium. They will be focusing on issues that they didn't get across the finish line this year, and then following the legislative session, all members of the House and half the Senate will be up for re-election. So usually in short sessions, the legislature tends to avoid controversial issues and talk tax increases. As we think about what we want to do for that short session, we certainly welcome your thoughts. I would encourage you to remember that we try to think about this as a 2-year process. And so we would be looking to your current legislative agenda and kind of marking off the things that we got done and focusing on those things we didn't get done. I'd encourage you over the next several months to thank the city's legislative delegation. They did an exceptional job. And I want to give a call out too. So we worked very closely with the 8th and the 15th, but I'll note, the legislators that used to represent Pasco also continue to care about Pasco. Representative Mark Clicker was very involved on the transportation side of things. Representative Skylar Rude frequently asked how things were going in downtown. Senator Dozier was asking about Dairy Gold and the opening at the port. So I think, Senator Schussler played a key role on capital budget. Representative Dye still very involved on water rights. I just want to give sort of the call out that you all have built a broad coalition beyond just those that directly represent the city. And I think that's led to a very successful legislative program. So with that, we are happy to answer any questions, and we hope we were your uplifting presentation of the evening.
Thank you, Ms. Marie. That was definitely a positive way to conclude or almost conclude our meeting. Do we have any questions or comments? I have Councilman Serrano first and then Councilman Campos.
Thank you. And thanks, ladies. Appreciate everything you brought forward to us. Just touching on Senate Bill 5352, the vehicular pursuits. Because that passed and because they did not adopt the amendment, I guess just a little bit walking back, this past weekend we had an individual who decided to take a lot of joyrides. Somewhere between 7 and 15 stolen vehicles is what was reported. Ended up being shot, died the next night or that night in the hospital. Lots of unfortunate events that are culminated in that individual's death. It's so because this amendment wasn't adopted, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong here, Chief Roski, some of the pursuit that should have been allowable or could have been allowable maybe several years back was not allowable because this is just someone stealing vehicles, trashing them, doing drugs, certain things that are not pursuable. So is it my understanding that there is no amendment that will be explored or could be explored because this was adopted and because the amendment failed to address pursuing vehicular theft?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the specific scenario you outlined and how the new law would apply, I would defer to Chief Roski and others at the city who are more familiar with the circumstances. I'm fully anticipating that we will see legislation introduced in 2024 to allow officers to pursue for stolen vehicles, and that will be a discussion that occurs during the 2024 session. Just because the amendment was offered and not adopted doesn't preclude the legislature from considering a future bill that accomplishes that same change in state law. Now, I do think that because it was offered and voted on, that gives you a signal of where this current legislature is likely to land in 2024. As I mentioned, later in 2024, all members of the House and half the Senate will be up for re-election. And then in 2025, you may have a different political dynamic, different personalities serving in the legislature that may change the outcome. It's possible that there may be enough shifting between 2023 and 2024 to change the outcome in the 2024 session. We're seeing a lot of individuals leave the legislature. And so there's appointments, there's individuals announcing they're running for statewide offices. So we're seeing some things shifting that could change the dialogue in 2024. And I fully anticipate that we'll see a bill introduced.
Okay, thank you. I guess once you hear that, please keep us apprised. I mean, again, last thing we need is just so many people were put in danger unnecessarily because this person couldn't be pursued. He ended up losing his life. It's a series of events that didn't need to happen because our police are ironically handcuffed here. So again, please just keep us abreast of any developments on that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say one thing that was a big takeaway from the legislative dialogue this last session is there is a strong desire by legislators to rely on data, but there is not accurate data available that is agreed upon by all stakeholders. So it does seem like the key, and I guess I say this from a very academic, bipartisan, non-political perspective, it seems like the key to finding the path forward on the issue in a fully conclusive manner relies on the ability to collect more data. So I'd encourage the city to look at what data collection options they have available to them, and if they're able to bring data to the table, that would be helpful in a legislative dialogue.
Thank you.
Councilman Campos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Murray and Ms. Kochi, for the presentation. This is less of a comment directed at you guys and more just a general public comment on the legislative priority for housing. Clearly, we as council have been working really hard to make housing a priority. Obviously, the ladies have made an effort to make sure that it's gotten in front of the legislative. But a frustration I have, and I think Councilwoman Roach can echo this, it seems like in our community that anytime there's a mention or even a whiff of, well, there's going to be new apartments, there's going to be new multifamily housing, immediately people come out of the woodwork to oppose it. And when they do that, unfortunately, we have an issue that is the recourse of that, and that is severe homelessness. And not everybody who's homeless is on drugs or, able to get off the street, but those who are, not able to afford housing currently are in dire straits. And if we want to kind of help alleviate both of those problems, we need as a community to be open-minded and support some of those multifamily housing options. The biggest thing on planning commission, anytime a rezone came up and an applicant talked about putting an apartment out, people came out in pitchforks and, they were ready to raise hell because they didn't want their property values to suffer. And unfortunately, I think overall, and we look at right now, I just got my assessor's thing back. My property value is skyrocketing, and I live where the homeless are impacting me substantially. I don't see it as a driving factor. So just as a big call for the community, please don't turn your nose up to an option that's presented to alleviate some of the need for housing and hopefully get some people off our streets. That's all.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else wish to make a comment? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes, I'll be brief. I just really wanted to, I've had the pleasure of working with Brianna since I've joined council, and actually before. She really is a consummate professional, and her effectiveness cannot be overstated. So I just wanted to make sure to personally thank you and Holly, of course. In the last couple of years, I've got an opportunity to work with you. Your reputation is a lot of the reason why we're able to be effective. This council, I think, defers well to you and pushes behind you, and I very much appreciate your efforts. And I also want to acknowledge your comments about how effective our legislative delegation is from our region, especially as many new members as there are. Amazing, absolutely amazing how eloquent and effective they have been at forming coalitions across party lines when necessary and really getting a lot of really good work done, not just for the city of Pasco, though. That's what I care most about, but across the state, they're showing themselves as leaders in our state, and it is impressive to watch. So we really have some great opportunities. This year was a great year for us. I will hold you to that level. Sorry, Brianna. So this is the low bar now. You got to exceed that. But truly, we have an opportunity right now to work with our legislators and really make a difference across the state and drive the state. So I hope we take that into mind as we're considering what stuff to do and how to support our staff, is that this matters, and not just for Pasco, but for the entire state. So we are a leader as Pasco, and that really showed this year. Every time I went up there, it was obvious Pasco's at the front. Governor coming into city of Pasco twice within 3 weeks, I can't think of a time that's happened before, just to celebrate his support for things that we care about as top priorities for us. That's huge. So anyways, I just want to thank you both very much for all your hard work. I hope you get to enjoy a little bit of summer before you're fully back into the work, and look forward to working with you this next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Councilwoman
for
Roach,
those
do you
kind
have any
words.
comments?
In the vein of being able to enjoy our summers, we also appreciate being able to present virtually this evening.
Thank you. Councilwoman Roach, do you have any comments?
I feel like a lot has already been said, and I appreciate what Mayor Protem just expressed. Gratitude for Brianna and Holly, and I would say the same. I've had the pleasure of working with both of you, and I enjoy it. And thank you so much for your hard work this last session. It obviously, from your presentation and what the updates we've gotten, has paid off for the city of Pasco. And that's it. So I hope you guys have a good evening.
Thank you. Any further comments? Well, Brianna and Holly, I just want to say, echo everything, all the comments everyone has already been saying, and thank you so much for putting Pasco on the forefront. And we are definitely changing and making waves, and so that's greatly in part to all the work that you guys are doing on your end. So thank you very much for pushing us through, and our legislators definitely.
Well, thank you, and it's certainly been an honor, and we hope to see you all soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. And with that, we will go on to our next item on the agenda, item number 12, miscellaneous discussion. Do we have anyone wishing to share anything on miscellaneous discussion? City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. First, I do have a few items, but I was going to let Mr. Gonzalez add a few updates that he had.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Just a note that applications for the 2024 Community Development Block Grant funding process began on June 1st. Those applications are due to the city's offices by June 30th. We've advertised both in local and regional Spanish and English newspapers, and have also reached out to applicants of the past at the city of Pasco, and also those applicants that have applied in nearby jurisdictions to expand our outreach. So we hope to distribute those applications and increase awareness amongst the community. Also want to point out that the Housing Action Plan is making significant progress. Staff recently concluded our community housing survey, which had just over 850 responses. And I think sort of a relevant discussion point brought up just recently is that we asked members of the community to tell us their housing experience in particular, so we could get a more broadened view of what's going on with housing for members of the community. And almost 80% of those that responded had shared with us that the cost of housing is an issue that impacts friends, families, someone they know, a coworker, a colleague. That finding ways for us as a city to ensure that older housing and some of our historic housing stock is kept in good and safe conditions was a priority, along with increasing access to home ownership. Those are both things that the block grant program that I just mentioned is prioritizing across the region in 2024. And in terms of preference for housing and neighborhoods, housing in neighborhoods with quality transportation access, such as wider sidewalks, crosswalks, and lighting. This really hits at some of that safety that is brought up earlier in the TIP presentation. Was ranked as the number one preference, followed by neighborhoods with access to park and recreational opportunities. I would also add that one question we did ask in the housing survey was for members of the community if they felt comfortable to tell us the kind of housing that they've lived in the past. And roughly 80% of the 850 responses that indicated that at some point in their housing experience, they've lived in a duplex, an apartment, studio, an ADU, and some have been homeless. And so it's important for us to ensure that we can accommodate all diverse housing experiences in the community. And as mentioned earlier by Councilmember Maloney, we had a successful and exciting strategy session to kick off our downtown implementation last week, focusing on ways to increase art and culture in our downtown, but certainly ways to increase that around the entire community. Thank you.
Just a couple other items. First of all, just want to acknowledge the hard work of Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Gonzalez on the cannabis ordinance tonight. That was obviously a culmination of tough conversations that you all had, but staff getting together and putting that together was a good undertaking, and Glad they came up with a resolution that was acceptable for council. Also wanted to mention that there's some updates on some of the key hiring that we've been working on. Rita Sigdell will be coming back on June 19th as our deputy city manager. Very excited about that. She is an awesome selection for that role and will be able to jump right in. So that's really great news. Hopefully later this week, we'll be able to make a formal announcement for the fire chief selection. We had our finalist interviews last week and had some good contenders there. Next week, we'll be doing interviews for our CED director finalists. And then right now, our HR director position is open, and then soon after, we'll be looking at what we're going to do with the ACS director position. So we're trying to keep those moving along and selecting those key positions. Also worth mentioning that, probably re-mentioning that the farmers market is open on Saturdays from 9 to 1. Jesse and his team have been really taking that, making sure they're learning from the folks that are helping run it right now and making that successful. And then also wanted to just mention, since we were talking about the TIF area earlier, recently staff just got back from Las Vegas for the International Convention for Shopping Centers. Had some really good meetings with other potential folks that would be a good fit out at the Broadmoor area. But just wanted to remind everyone that with passing the TIF, the City Council authorized nearly $40 million in bonded funds to make the infrastructure happen. That but-for test of those investments, development wouldn't happen. We've got a $9 million project for the off-ramp that's out right now. That'll be a little under or around a year-long project. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to select a finalist there. We're also only a couple of weeks out from being able to put out next week we'll be able to put out for the utility project as well. And then from there, it's really up to what we know is coming so that we can be confident in extending the city's debt. When the build out is done, we're looking at about $3 million a year in debt service. So we take that financial position very seriously, while trying to find that balance with knowing that there's great potential businesses that are looking at coming here. And while there's rumors out there, nothing's signed to my knowledge. So we'll keep working and trying to do the right things that City Council's been asking staff to focus on in that area. I guess it's also worth mentioning that the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Adams, also have a pretty significant financial stake and are outlaying funding as well for projects out there. So it definitely is a team effort to make that a successful economic development project for the future of Pasco. I think this is probably easily the biggest economic development project I'll see in my career. That's I think saying something. It's something that's a huge impact, and with one or two landowners driving it makes it, I think, that much more effective for them to have positive outcomes for the community. So with that, that's what I have for my updates.
Councilman Campos, you have a comment, question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I have a lot to say tonight. I haven't spoke to you guys in several weeks, so I just want to be clear, City Manager Lincoln. I think, the role of the council, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, it's to help pass ordinances and develop infrastructure that makes it attractive for businesses to come into a particular area. The only time council per se gets kind of hands-on is when there's a potential rezone, and even then, that rezone doesn't guarantee that something is, again, it's just an applicant that's asking for a land use, a proposed land use, and council doesn't yay or nay that business. We're land use only. That's our role, responsibility. And Mr. Ferguson, you can weigh in there too if you want. But I think that we as council have satisfied that requirement, and our goals is to try to make the Broadmoor area as attractive as possible. And at this point, it really comes down to the landowner. And I think it would not be wise for council's position to get involved with the private landowner's business and what they're doing. And again, I think it sounds as if city staff is helping work and drive that relationship, but that's about the extent of what we're responsible for.
I agree, and I would just add that you also passed the Broadmoor Master Plan, which really helped lay that foundational groundwork for what your vision is to, what you want to see out there, both in land use and look and feel with the design standards.
Thank you. Any other updates? Mayor Potem Baloney.
Thank you, Mayor Barajas. So to follow up on that briefly, Mr. Lincoln or Mr. Ferguson as appropriate, we only have so many tools in our toolbox in Washington State. We're very constitutionally limited about what we can do for promotion of any individual business. Are there any tools, and if you can't mention them right now or you're not ready to say that right now, could we get an update very soon as to what other tools may be in our toolbox from a legal and financial perspective to ensure the effective growth of the Broadmoor area?
I'm not aware of any. I mean, I think there's probably some multifamily tax exemption things that will come out of the study that Mr. Gonzalez mentioned. But as far as economic development incentives in Washington State, TIF is the tool. You're right. We're pretty limited in Washington State, and it was a big leap forward to be, I think the 48th state to allow for TIF.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the entire point of the TIF, right, was to alleviate the financial contribution from individual businesses to use their growth and the increase in tax value for those parcels to pay for things. And we're taking a loan against that future growth to pay for this infrastructure. So I think, Mr. Lincoln, you said $40 million of expected financial contribution here that would otherwise be paid by individual developers as they build out. So yeah, if there's anything else in our toolbox, or I'd appreciate staff thinking through that. But yeah, thank you. Last item I've got just real quick. So during that meeting last Friday for the downtown, about art in downtown, one of the things that that was hosted, I guess, by the Arts and Culture Commission, and they mentioned that they're still down on commissioners. I think, according to the website, they're down 3 positions right now. I know the youth representative position has been vacant for almost a year, and there's at least one position I think has been open longer than that. I don't know how the rest of our boards and commissions are looking at what other vacancies we might have, but we really need to get these positions filled promptly. And if we need to put in some sort of proclamation or other resolution by the city as to a timeline that ensures staff understands exactly how urgent this is, I'm willing to propose one to put a upper limit on how long we let any position stay vacant. But this is, frankly, it's unacceptable from my perspective.
We'll get an update to council on what's vacant in real time so that you can have that.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Oh, Councilman Campos.
Just briefly wanted to mention that, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, I want you to hold me accountable. I think with BFT running their art competition with local high school students, I will put out a call to see if maybe they can gauge interest from the schools, and I'll put you on CC. And if you don't see that from me, I'd ask you to try to hold me accountable. Make sure I do that.
Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. Any other miscellaneous discussion from other council members?
Mayor, this is Councilmember Roach, and I just have a couple things and want to piggyback off of conversations about Broadmoor development as well as the TIF. And I think that there's something that we can do because I wish I had $1 every time somebody asks me about Costco, and just realizing that, and I can kind of see Councilmember Milne shaking his head. Yes, and this is something that just is coming up over and over again. And I think that there are some general, and I say this because the TIF is really new, and we as local legislators understand, because we're in it and we're steeped in it, that there's maybe some education, like public education, we can do that is a tool that we've taken advantage of, and is really a business and economic development tool that is now at our fingertips. And back to what Councilmember Campos said, we cannot as council members, really go and invite a Costco and have those discussions when we're not the private landowner. And I think there is a lot of confusion about that. So I'm not sure what messaging city staff can do to help educate the public about that, what's within our role, what the city is doing, what is within the landowner's role, and what's within their power to do. But I believe as a council and as a body, we're doing the absolute best that we can to invite that sort of economic development in Pasco. And I believe city staff is doing that as well. And along those lines, just, you know, the last couple days interfacing with a number of Pasco residents who are, you know, concerned or have questions about, you know, our changes in our DPDA and the dissolving of that, and really looking for good communication from city staff about, you know, where we are in the steps of what we are trying to do, that we have a consultant, that we are getting good recommendations on how to move forward with those things that do work really well for DPDA, which is farmers market and Pasco specialty kitchen. And that it's our intent to keep those programs that are working really well and keep those going. And so I think the public is looking for some of that reassurance because they don't want to lose those things. And there is that question kind of hanging out there. Well, now that DPDA is no longer active, what will happen? And along that same line, then it is something we've talked about so many times in council and retreats. The public has brought it up to us, and it's about art, is murals. I mean, it just keeps coming up over and over again. And like, where are we at with the murals? And we owe it to ourselves for the time and effort that we care about this and prioritize it, as well as the public wanting it to communicate where we are at in the process and when this is something that will happen for the city, because people really are wanting to see us update that sign code so that murals are something that they get to see in the city of Pasco. So just a few things, and looking to city staff to help communicate and educate on those few things. Thanks.
Thank you.
If I could just add, there's a KNDU piece that's on TIFF that, if it's not out already, it should be out soon. That talks about the methodology and what you'll see out at the Broadmoor area. The communications team is working on a communications plan for the transfer of duties for the both the PSK and farmers market, and agreed that's something that's going to be a priority. And I think July is what Jacob had mentioned would be when we bring back the mural discussion with council. So all things that are good things to mention, and that we're trying to keep moving in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any further comment? I do actually have something to add myself. First, I want to apologize to Chief Roski. I was not here for the National Police Week proclamation. I was actually with several of the staff and city manager in Houston, Texas. City of Pasco is one of 5, and I think I mentioned this before, one of 5 cities selected among the nation through the National League of Cities for the Mayor's Institute to talk about some of the projects that we've been doing that puts Pasco as a leader among cities. And I wrote that down. Don't recall who said that. But I will transfer it over to Jacob, and I don't know if Jessica, if you want to step up and add a little bit about what we've been doing, what you've been doing. Really, I was just along for the ride. So Jacob, if you want to elaborate a little bit, I know you'll come back here in the next few weeks or so with a full report. But if you'd like to add a little bit more, again, we were one of 5 cities in the nation selected. We presented along with, it was New York, Gresham, Oregon, Georgia, yikes, I forgot who, Texas, and then Pasco. So, we're doing something good. We're doing something great, actually, to be one of 5 in the nation. So, Jacob, if you'd like to add.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to be brief, although this is actually a really exciting topic, and I know it's late. So we'll definitely come back to both the Planning Commission and Council with more updates as we move forward with this effort. But essentially what staff is try to do is identify and align council goals along with comp plan policies and what the community has been asking for, particularly in downtown and central Pasco, and what we can do to increase awareness, engagement, ownership, and pride amongst our community members and businesses, and what we can do to sort of reimagine not only our planning, but certainly just community development and government in as a whole, to ensure that the needs and desires of our residents are not only heard, but listened to and acted upon promptly, and that ensuring that they have been a part of the process from start to finish. Staff, myself, Jessica Bracken, Gina Vasquez, and City Manager Adam Lincoln, along with you, Mayor Bras, had a wonderful opportunity to really go brag in Houston about what we're doing in Pasco, and then take some lessons learned. And we're excited to take these words and turn it into action. So look forward to a lot of work coming out of the department over the next several weeks and likely months.
Thank you for sharing that. So looking forward to sharing our experience. But on that note, Chief, I'll be coming over to show my support. Just really appreciate PD and fire department as well. With that, any other comments under miscellaneous discussion? No. Guess what? No need for executive session. So
Madam Mayor,
it is
Madam Mayor,
10.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I'm sorry to have to do this, but it's come to my attention that Councilmember Brown has some concerns with regard to the vote that he made on a previous item, and so now would be the time. If you have those concerns, you need to in order to do that, you would have to make a motion to reconsider the item, and then it would need a second for that debate to take place.
I don't know about the whole paragraph, but it goes like this from.
No, just a motion to reconsider that particular item.
Just to make a motion to consider my vote?
Make a motion to reconsider the cannabis ordinance.
Okay. So I make a motion to reconsider the cannabis order.
Ordinance, I believe it's 4670.
4670.
It would require a second to then be debatable.
I'll second it.
Okay, please proceed.
Okay. Where I did not ask for clarification in my concern of, how can I put this, and the restrictions of the zoning from I think 1,000 feet down to 100, and then spread throughout the city. So there was two ways I was looking at it. So I voted yes for it, and my vote is actually no.
Okay, so yeah, so with regard, would you like me to expand on any of that, or you're sure?
No, you can.
Okay, yeah, just with regard to the buffers, the way the ordinance that was presented and was voted on, the ordinance allowed for the district, the downtown district, as defined by those streets. That's where the reduction of the buffer was only there, and citywide, with regard to the other districts, zoning districts, those did not have necessarily any, or they had no reduction in buffers. They were all the 1,000. So knowing that, you would like to proceed?
It's just the same as no.
Okay. So the motion on the table, so the motion on the table is to reconsider. It's been seconded and now debated, so it would need to go up for a vote to then reconsider, and then we would move back to the original motion.
To reconsider his.
That's what's on the floor now, and so it just needs a vote to be able to open that back up. So if a motion to reconsider.
Let's do that, a roll call vote.
Councilmember Milne?
So I'm voting, like if I vote yes, I'm voting like if I vote yes, that he could change his vote, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so yes.
So the vote to reconsider would then put the original motion back where it was before the roll vote was taken. So it would still, the original motion would still be on the floor. It's been seconded. It would just go back to the point before the council member made his vote.
Okay, so yes.
Councilmember Roach?
I'm voting yes for Councilmember Irving Brown to reconsider his vote.
Thank you. Councilmember Serrano?
Yes.
Councilmember Campos?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Mayor Barajas.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
So this
Okay,
takes
so
it
we're right
to-
back at the point before the vote was taken, so now any debate can take place if it's been motioned and seconded. So that's where we're at.
All right. Motion is seconded and it's been passed, and so
No, not anymore.
So it's been unpassed.
Unpassed.
I would ask
Yeah.
for a roll call vote on the motion that we have already moved and seconded.
ordinance number 4670.
Yes.
So
No,
roll
it's
call
already-
vote on that.
It's been moved and seconded. We go right back to the point at which, right before the roll call vote was taken. So it's been moved and seconded, and it's open for debate. If folks want to continue to debate it, you certainly can at this point. But then another vote would need to be taken.
Are there any questions or comments? I guess.
I'll just, if I can comment on this, I just want to clarify, I believe that the way that we have this written originally was to create that reduced buffer zone only in the downtown Pasco area. And just like everything else, we are not touching the buffer zones in the other areas, which is aligned, I think, with the conversation we've had throughout this. And I just want to make sure that that's how I understand it. That's how it's been presented. And then I think that this aligns with everything we've discussed up till this point, and ready to take the roll call vote.
Ready?
Roll call vote.
All right. Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Milne.
No.
Councilmember Roach.
Yes.
Councilmember Serrano.
No.
Councilmember Campos.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Yes.
And Mayor Barajas.
Yes.
So that's 4, 4, and 3 against. It passes.
And it passes. Thank you. All right. It's documented, right? Okay, so we can move forward. All right, last item on the agenda. Chief, there was no executive session, but we had to go back and do this. So it is now 10:23 and this meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening.
Good night, everyone.